Episode 201, Redemption Song. Beautiful music blended with a sorrowful voice had echoed inside the quiet room. It had been almost dawn, and just as the song had pierced through the silence, the moonlight had pierced through the glass windows. Upon hearing the melody, Brad had been immediately frozen to the spot, almost unable to breathe. It had been as though he had been struck by a thunderbolt. The music had brought back memories, as that had been the last piece his mother had played for him all those years ago. He had slowly and tightly clenched his fist and then covered his ears with his hands as he had tried to block the sound of the music and all the memories the music had conjured up. He hadn't wanted to hear the song, but no matter how hard he tried, the music had still filled his head. It had been like the soft and gentle voice of an angel reaching out to his irredeemable and damaged soul. Brad had eventually relented. His body had bent over, and his head had thumped against the table. His hands had still covered his ears, but the tune still filtered through despite his efforts to mute it. It had seemed to increase in volume and penetrate the darkness that surrounded him. Minutes had passed, but the song had continued. He had begun to feel that the person playing had been telling him the song would continue unless he relented. "Tyler, make it stop," he had ordered in a terrifying voice, but the boy behind him had not moved a muscle. It had been as if he were transfixed, and Brad had had no choice but to back down. He had moved his hands away from his ears, and they had fallen to his sides. When he had finally heard the song clearly, he had stood with his fists clenched so tightly that his nails had dug into his palms. Then he started to walk slowly in the direction of the song. Tyler had seen Brad move and had quietly followed him, like a silent shadow, toward the source of the music. As they had walked, the sorrowful sound had continued to pierce him more deeply and painfully with each note he heard. Finally, they had reached the school's music room. The door had been opened wide, and the moment Brad had laid his eyes on the person playing, he had stopped dead in his tracks. A young girl, just a few years younger than he had been at the time, wearing a white dress, had been sitting at the piano, playing effortlessly and with flair. She had looked as though she was glowing, and she had seemed so out of place in all this darkness. Brad had only been able to see her profile, but he had been able to see that she was crying quietly, and something had tugged at his heart. The moonlight had shone on her face and had lit up her tears as though they had been tiny crystals falling from her eyes. The vision of the young girl quietly crying in front of him and the sorrowful music she was playing had seemed to resurrect his cold and dead heart. Tears had started to quietly fall from his own eyes. He had continued to stare at the young girl in the white dress as her music continued to penetrate the deepest, darkest abyss within him. Brad had slowly dropped to his knees and tugged his own hair as he had cried. He had cried tears from eyes that had been barren for many years. He had hugged himself as he had continued to cry, quietly but uncontrollably. He had dug his nails into his own flesh so that blood mingled with his tears on the floor. The sound of the piano had continued to fill the space around him, and the tears of both Brad and the young girl had continued to flow. Brad had felt as though the music were a message to him that he must cry until he had no tears left. The sound of the piano, the young girl, and her tears lit up by the moon had together made his heart feel as though it were going to explode. He had felt as if he were being saved from eternal damnation. And as time had gone by, the song that had filled him with agony and sorrow had begun miraculously to feel as if someone had been gently caressing his hair. He had felt as if someone had whispered to him to raise his head once more. And strangely, the song had started to soothe his heart, and a tiny glimmer of hope had reappeared deep inside his eyes. And Brad had finally raised his head again. He had stood up as the song was about to end, and he had run back to the computer room while the piano was still playing. When he had reached the computer room, he had immediately canceled the launching sequence and had destroyed every existing trace of the unforgivable crime he had been about to commit only moments before. The second he had finally set the computer to auto-delete everything, the sound of the piano had finally stopped. Brad had turned toward the door, but as he had been about to leave the computer room, they had heard voices. 2 guards had appeared together with a woman they assumed to be a nurse, and they had led the young girl away. Tyler had watched as Brad froze where he stood, watching the young girl's back as she disappeared. "Do you want to go and see her?" he had asked. Brad had paused for a moment before he had shaken his head forlornly. "People will soon come here to investigate. We can't involve her," Brad had replied weakly, and then he had turned to hug Tyler. Tyler had been startled, but before he had been able to react, Brad had fainted. Tyler had simply sighed with relief and slowly lifted Brad onto his back and carried him away. But before they had left that place, Tyler had decided to sneak into the clinic to see the young girl's face. He had been about to enter the clinic when he had seen the young girl being led out by a nurse. Tyler had hidden around a corner, and luckily, before they had disappeared, he had caught a glimpse of the girl and had committed her face to memory. And being Tyler, with his superhuman abilities, he would never forget a face. Episode 202, Brad's Sick. As soon as Haley struck the last note, she opened her eyes and glanced at the moon before taking a deep breath. Then she slowly and quietly turned around, curious to see if Brad had fallen asleep. However, to her surprise, he remained in the same spot as he had been when she had started playing, and his gaze was locked on her. She was both a little disconcerted and disappointed, because it seemed that the lullaby that had worked when he was young was no longer effective. She stood up and walked toward him, but he remained motionless. I heard that you always listened to a piano song to fall asleep when you were young, so I thought it might still help you sleep. But Haley was unable to finish her sentence because Brad had suddenly pulled her toward him, wrapped his arms around her, and hugged her tightly like never before. Haley was surprised. She would always remember how it felt to be in Brad's embrace. She would never forget just how warm and soothing it was to be wrapped in his arms. But for some reason, this time, it was different. She felt that it was stronger than ever, and the way he held her was like he never wanted to let her go. Haley could hear the loud beating of his heart, and she felt as if he were trying to tell her to never let go and just let him hug her. She gently squeezed him back as she buried her face in his chest. She didn't understand what had caused this reaction, but she wanted to hug him back and remain in his arms. Brad didn't speak. He rested his head in the crook of her neck and didn't let go of her for a long time. Then Haley felt his body slowly go limp, and she noticed that his temperature seemed to have risen. She had already thought that his body was a little too warm the moment he had taken her in his arms, but she had thought that it had been because he was blushing, and she had ignored it. But now, she knew something wasn't right. Brad, are you all right? I think you're a little too hot, she said, but he didn't reply, and she started to feel anxious. She tried to pull away, but before she could move, they suddenly fell on the bed together. Haley found herself on top of him, and it was a minute or two before she finally got up and was able to examine him properly. He was sweating, covered in hives, and when she felt his forehead with her hand, he was burning up. She immediately jumped off the bed and went to the door. As soon as she opened it, she saw Tyler was already standing outside. Mr. Clark, Brad is sick. I think we need to take him to the hospital, she said. She looked at Tyler with fear and concern etched across her face. When Tyler saw how worried she was, he patted her head. Easy, Miss Haley. Why are you two such worrywurts when it comes to each other? It's just a fever, okay? Nothing to worry about, he reassured her. No, it's not just a fever. He's covered in hives all over, she protested. Please don't worry. His temperature will stabilize soon enough, and those hives aren't serious. Come, let's just get him to take this medicine, and all will be well, Tyler said calmly. Haley could only follow his lead despite the anguish that she felt. Together, they woke up Brad, helped him take some medicine, and soon he was asleep again. Haley sat by his side, gazing lovingly at his peaceful face as he slept. She looked over at Tyler and asked, Are you sure he's fine? She still looked worried. I'm disappointed by your lack of faith in me, Miss Haley, he said mischievously, preparing to leave. But how did you already know that he was sick? Haley asked. He leaned in toward her and whispered, Actually, despite him being cold, his skin is actually extremely sensitive to the cold itself. Funny, right? He becomes like that if he's exposed to sudden icy temperatures or cold water. His mother was like that, and it seems he inherited it from her. So don't worry, okay? It'll only last for a couple hours, and he'll be right as rain again. And with that, Tyler left Haley at Brad's bedside. She remained watching him quietly for a long time. Then she felt his forehead once more and was finally convinced that his temperature was starting to return to normal. Relieved and now exhausted from the worry, she let out a big sigh. She lay down beside him, wrapped her arms around him, and settled down to sleep. Episode 203, Coincidence or Fate? Tyler was asleep on the bed in the corner of Brad's study. It was too much hassle for him to return to his own room, so he preferred to sleep there. And more importantly, this place was closer to the couple's bedroom, which meant it would be easier for him to be there quickly if something unthinkable happened. He woke up suddenly and opened his eyes, as his razor-sharp senses told him that someone was coming. He looked over to the clock on the wall and saw it was 3 o'clock in the morning. He didn't move a muscle. He just covered his eyes with the back of his hand as he waited for the door to open, because he knew it was Brad who was on his way. The next second, the door opened and Brad entered quickly before he abruptly closed the door behind him. He had the look of someone who was running from something. He leaned against the closed door and covered his mouth with the back of his hand. Tyler's brows knitted together in a frown, and he sat up, although he already had a vague suspicion of what was going on inside Brad's head. He got up and turned on the light, and when he saw Brad's face, he almost burst out laughing. What's with those red ears of yours? What has happened to you? he thought, trying not to chuckle out loud. Tyler was grinning as he moved toward him, but Brad turned and walked straight to the couch near the large glass window. Tyler followed him and started to try to get him to talk in his usual playful manner. "So, what's wrong, Brad? Is there something troubling you?" he asked. But Brad didn't seem to care what Tyler said and just glared at him instead with a serious look on his face. As he didn't appear to be in a joking mood, Tyler decided to drop his usual teasing and keep his mouth shut for the time being. Then Brad removed his mask and looked at Tyler intently before he opened his mouth. "Tell me, she's that girl from back then, isn't she?" he asked. Tyler sat on the chair across from him before he replied calmly and quietly. "How do you know that it's her? Miss Haley might only be playing the same piece of music that was played back then," he said. Brad's face immediately darkened with the threat of anger. Tyler quickly realized his mistake. He straightened up and immediately began to speak in a serious tone to save himself from any trouble. "I'm just asking, okay? I'm not joking," he said as he sighed. He was about to begin to explain when Brad started speaking. "I don't know. I just felt that it was her. My heart seemed to be the one to have recognized her," he explained as his eyes flickered with intense emotion. Tyler almost choked when he heard what Brad said, and he looked at him with wonder and disbelief. Damn it. When did this man learn to spout such heartfelt words so easily, without getting embarrassed at all? He's finally getting to grips with romance, he thought. "You choosing her wasn't a coincidence at all, was it?" Brad continued. Tyler's voice took on a serious tone when he heard these words. "Brad, let me ask you, do you believe in fate?" he asked, but Brad didn't respond. So Tyler continued. "The truth is, I didn't search for her. That time you gave me that contract, I bumped into her in the middle of the road, and I immediately recognized her. It wasn't planned at all. But whether it's a coincidence or fate, I think that's for you to decide." Silence followed his words, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. Brad just sat there, staring out through the windows into the darkness. It was as though he was considering something more important than his own life. After a while, Tyler spoke again. "So, what are you planning to do now?" he asked. Brad seemed to have come back to his senses. He began to speak without averting his gaze from the window. "I don't know," he began. Then he suddenly added, "Let's go buy a ring." And once again, lights that hadn't appeared in his eyes for a long time started shining like stars in the night sky. "Now, let's at least wait until dawn. Go back to sleep for now," Tyler complained. Brad fell silent again before he finally agreed. He then took his mask and went to leave the room. But just as he was about to open the door, he turned back and looked intently at Tyler. He looked as though there was something he wanted to say, but for some reason, he was hesitating. Tyler was intrigued. "What is it?" he asked. Brad raised his hand and started rubbing the back of his neck, and he took on the appearance of a shy young boy. "My body is acting strangely. I used to be calm and relaxed while hugging her and watching her sleep, but now I'm suddenly having a hard time controlling myself," he said, and he gazed at the window again as he continued to rub his neck. These words and gestures confounded Tyler, and he couldn't respond. Brad continued, "Tell me, what should I do to calm down?" Tyler suddenly felt so excited, but he didn't exhibit a trace of shock or mischief. Instead, he maintained a calm and unaffected expression, as if what Brad had said was perfectly normal. He moved closer to him and then patted his shoulder like a grandfather about to impart some great words of wisdom. "Unfortunately, there's no cure for it. The only thing you can do is go all the way with her." Episode 204, Things Have Got to Change. "Unfortunately, there's no cure for it. The only thing you can do is go all the way with her," Tyler said. But to his surprise, Brad just looked at him without any change in his expression. He just looked as though Tyler's supposedly heart-stopping advice hadn't even reached him. Seeing his lack of reaction, Tyler wondered whether he'd even heard what he just said. "Did you hear what I said?" he asked, his voice a little louder this time. However, the next words to come out of Brad's mouth almost made him give up all his efforts entirely. "What are you trying to say?" Brad asked. He seemed to be genuinely unsure about the exact meaning of Tyler's words. His question caused Tyler to sigh in frustration and exasperation. "I'm trying to tell you to just go ahead and make a baby. Do you understand?" Tyler said, raising a questioning eyebrow and trying very hard not to resort to teasing. But Brad's reaction to this clarification was completely unexpected. Suddenly, he looked as though what Tyler had said was the worst news. In fact, he looked distressed when Tyler had expected him to be excited. Tyler was completely at a loss as to what was going through his mind. "But I can't do that," he said, and the light in his eyes began to dim. Tyler's shoulders fell with disappointment. I don't know what to say. I don't understand why you have to hold back. I understand what you want to happen. You're sleeping in the same bed, you've both declared your love for each other, and she's your wife, Tyler replied. I don't see what the problem is, he thought as his frustration increased. But Brad just looked outside into the darkness again. Yes, she's my wife, but I can't deny the fact that up until now, she's just been my contracted wife. I can't make any wrong moves. I won't do anything improper with her just because of my uncontrolled mounting desire. I want to fully surrender my complete self to her first, he explained. Tyler fell silent. He was wide-eyed and open-mouthed. He had never heard Brad speak for this long without stopping. Oh my God, that's exactly 50 words at once. Wow, did he just set his very own Guinness World Record? He thought. Not only was Tyler shocked by how long Brad had spoken and how many words he had uttered, but also by the nature of those words. He had also spoken with determination and sincerity, as if he were making a sacred and pure promise. And while Tyler was still trying to pull himself together and calm down enough to be able to give the right words of advice, Brad suddenly spoke again. She has saved me, not once, but twice. She has given me her heart even though she's not allowed to see my face. She has cried for me even though I can't tell her my name. She has accepted me unconditionally despite my darkest side. Honestly, the more I look at her, the more I know her, the more I feel like I don't deserve her love. That's why I want to become worthy of her love. Our strange and abnormal relationship, the heartless rules and contract between us, I want to fix it all. From now on, I want to give her the best of me and the best of everything. Once he had finished, he simply turned around and stepped through the door, leaving Tyler stunned and speechless for some time before he finally came to his senses once more. That was more than 100 words, right? Amazing. You want to fully submit your complete self to her first? Well, a king submitting himself to his queen sounds like not that bad a plan after all, he thought as he scratched his chin. Tyler finally smiled with relief. This was the first time Brad had voiced his feelings. He knew that their marriage had been a cold contract with heartless rules from the beginning. He couldn't ignore the fact that Haley might still be thinking constantly about her mission to bear him a child. Although their relationship had changed now that they were deeply in love, there were still doors that needed to be open for them to be together without reservation. Brad needed to reveal himself entirely, or their relationship would never be complete. Tyler realized that Brad was now taking their relationship much more seriously. Much more so than he had ever expected. And even though he wanted a nephew as soon as possible, he couldn't deny that Brad's decision had been the best. Tyler realized that if Brad consummated their relationship now, Haley might believe that he was only doing it for the sake of their mission stipulated in the contract. Tyler was deep in thought and was about to head back to bed when he stopped in his tracks and a thought flashed across his mind. Wait, does this mean that he wants to dissolve their contract now? Is that why he wanted to go and find a ring right now? He thought. As soon as Haley struck the last note, Episode 205, A Normal Man. Brad had returned to their room and had quietly lain down beside his wife. A moment ago, he had been watching her sleep, and then he had turned and faced toward the lamp by the bedside. His face was red, and his heart was starting to flutter. After a while, Brad quietly exhaled a deep sigh as he desperately tried to calm down. He was in the process of trying to slow his heart when a soft arm suddenly wrapped around his waist, and he immediately froze. Brad held his breath while his wife moved her body even closer to his. She held him as though she were trying to protect him, but the moment Brad had felt her warm body and her warm breath touching him, he had begun to feel a scorching heat spreading throughout his entire body like an unstoppable wildfire. His already scarlet face burned even redder, and his fluttering heart beat faster. Eventually, drops of sweat started falling from his forehead. It was the first time Brad had ever felt that way. He had been sleeping beside her ever since she had arrived in the house. He liked her gentle touch, and he loved her warm embrace. Her mere existence was enough to soothe him, as though she was a breath of fresh air or fresh raindrops watering his withered soul. Ever since she had entered his life, she had become his lullaby, and she had ended his sleepless nights. She had become his safe and comfortable haven. She had become his home. But at that moment, something strange was happening to him. He couldn't calm down, and it was the first time his desire to touch her was so strong that he could barely think straight. He had finally discovered and understood the true meaning of sexual desire. He realized that it was not something to be taken lightly. The urge was so powerful that it could overturn even his iron will and knock him senseless. Thinking that he had better move before he lost control, Brad gently took hold of her hand, slowly lifted it, and removed it from his body. He reached for the white teddy bear and placed her arm around it. The woman, still sound asleep, squeezed the bear as she began to talk in her sleep. "Brad, so soft," she said before she loosened up her grip on the bear. Brad was now blushing like a red tomato, and just as he thought that he finally felt better now that their bodies were no longer in contact, his line of sight fell on her beautiful lips, and he started to feel hot again. He reflexively covered his mouth with the back of his hand as he stood up and stepped back. Tyler couldn't get back to sleep, so he finally left Brad's study and went upstairs. To his surprise, Brad was standing outside his bedroom, leaning on the door. Tyler couldn't hide his smile. "So what's this? I bet he's struggling," he thought as he approached Brad with a naughty grin on his face. "Didn't I tell you to go back to bed and get some sleep?" Tyler asked, raising an eyebrow. Brad just glared at him. Tyler then noticed the traces of sweat on Brad's forehead, and he chuckled. He then sidled over to Brad and whispered in his ear, "So do you finally realize how hard it is to hold back? I bet you thought it was easy, right? Well, it's not so easy, is it? I wonder how long you will last," he teased. "It's strange. I didn't feel like this before," said Brad. Tyler just leaned on the wall and faced him. "Well, didn't this start that night she French kissed you? Or maybe it's because you finally started opening up. And I think because you finally told her how you feel, and so has she. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe you were subconsciously restraining yourself before. But now, oh well, that's not important anymore. What you should be thinking about right now is the fact that you're finally turning into a normal man," Tyler said as he chuckled. Brad didn't respond to anything Tyler said. He just said, "Let's go." "Why are you suddenly so impatient? Is it because you realize you can't hold back anymore?" Tyler said again, taunting him as he followed behind. But Brad remained quiet. "Well, that's a good thing. But the shops are still closed at this hour. Oh wait, there are 24-hour shops in Greenport. Anyway, what kind of ring do you want? There are hundreds of rings to choose from, you know." Episode 206, Off to School. Haley had woken up and frowned when she realized that she was hugging the fluffy bear. She had dreamed that she was cuddling the soft and fluffy Brad, so she was surprised when she opened her eyes and saw that Brad wasn't even beside her. She yawned and stretched her arms above her head, and then she sat up in bed, a little dazed for a while until she remembered everything that had happened the night before. She remembered her declaration of love, Brad's response, and all the things she had discovered about him. As she replayed everything in her mind, her heart felt as if it was dancing with warmth and happiness. That night had become one of the most unforgettable nights of her entire life. She would treasure the memories for the rest of her days. But her smile faded as she recalled that Brad had fallen ill the night before, and she jumped out of bed and ran out of the bedroom to look for him. When she got downstairs, Leonard was waiting for her in the living room, and she walked quickly over to him. "Where's Brad?" she asked anxiously, looking around. "Oh, they left hours ago, Miss Haley. He said he needed to do something. But don't worry, he said he would be back soon," Leonard replied. Her eyes widened as she asked, "So he's not sick anymore?" Leonard looked at her with a confused expression. "Sick? No, he was full of energy when they left," he answered, and then Haley remembered what Tyler had told her about Brad's condition. She thought about it a little more and heaved a sigh of relief. "Anyway, Miss Haley, are you not going to school today?" Leonard asked her. She suddenly remembered she had something important that she couldn't miss. She gasped. "Oh, yes, we have an important test today, right?" she asked. Leonard just nodded calmly. She grabbed his collar and shook him playfully. "Why didn't you wake me up earlier?" "I thought you wouldn't be going to school because your husband is finally here," he reasoned. Haley smacked her forehead with her palm. She couldn't really blame Leonard because she had totally forgotten about the test herself. Her mind had been so full of Brad that she hadn't been able to think about anything else. But she knew that the test was important, and Brad seemed to be busy today with something, as he had had to leave so early. She badly wanted to spend time with her husband now that he was finally home, but since he was doing some errands, she decided she would go to school and take her test. "I'll be home later, and then we can spend some time together," she decided. "We can go to school now. We still have time, and the test will be over in a couple hours, right?" she asked, and Leonard nodded. She quickly ran back toward the stairs. Soon, Haley was ready for school. She was dressed simply, but managed to exude understated elegance. Leonard had spent a lot of time with her over the last month or so, and he had been amazed by how effortlessly she wore ordinary clothes with a style of her own. She donned the simplest of outfits with grace, and her unparalleled natural beauty stunned everyone wherever she went, including Leonard on occasion. Haley noticed that Leonard was deep in thought and flicked his forehead, causing him to snap back to reality. "Ouch, that hurt, Miss Haley," he cried out with feigned indignance. But she wasn't taking any nonsense. "You're in a world of your own today. Are you hungry or sick or something? Come on, let's go. We have to hurry," she said, and she dragged him out of the mansion as if he were an unruly teenager and threw him inside the car. Episode 207, At the Jewelry Store. Brad and Tyler were at one of the city's jewelry shops. They had already visited two of the biggest and most famous jewelry stores in the city, and this was the third. Tyler had begun to think that Brad was looking for a ring that didn't exist. "Brad, just what kind of ring are you looking for?" Tyler asked. Brad turned toward him and said calmly, "Something extraordinary." Tyler had no answer to this. He just rested his chin on his hand. "Extraordinary? Didn't they show you such rings in the first and second stores? They showed you unique rings that have been created by world-famous designers," he said. But still, Brad didn't seem convinced. "These rings, including the ones you're talking about, all look the same," he said with straight face. "Hey, it's only you that can't see the difference. They all have differences. They vary in design and material. Can't you see?" said Tyler, and he started to drag him over to stare at some more rings. But Brad stood his ground and responded decisively. "I want something special. Something that has been made especially for her. Something unique," he said. Tyler sighed, but then his eyes sparkled as an idea came into his head. "Why didn't you say that earlier? Come on, let's go. I know someone who can make you a one-of-a-kind ring," he said, and the two men hastily exited the jewelry store. An hour later, Tyler and Brad were inside an old antique jewelry shop owned by a world-famous designer and international artist, Veho. After they had spent some time inside, Brad had seemed as if he had finally found what he had been looking for, and he had appeared to be quite satisfied at last. The increasingly bright aura around him had reflected this. However, the bright aura hadn't lasted for long. On their way back to the car, Brad overheard Haley's name mentioned by a group of female students as they were passing by. "Yes, of course, Haley was quite stunning as usual today, but her lovely clinging boyfriend looked cute too." "Yeah, right? Look, I took a photo of them." "Wow, that's a beautiful shot of the power couple. They really are so perfect for each other. And what's more, I've got it on good authority that they're living together now. Can you imagine that?" "Gosh, are you for real? Leonard and Haley are living together?" As the students were talking, Brad's aura started turning unbelievably cold. The words, Haley and Leonard, power couple, and living together were like a broken record repeating over and over in his head. Tyler had also heard the students' conversation and noticed Brad's reaction. Of course, this reaction was to be expected from Brad, but it still made him nervous. He was just about to give a speech about rumors and how it was better to ignore them when he saw Brad stop and shake his head. It was as if he were trying to remove unnecessary thoughts. Tyler thought that perhaps he would get away with it. Maybe Brad wouldn't think they were talking about his Haley, or that they were just rumors he didn't need to worry about. "What's going on? Is there something wrong?" Tyler asked innocently. "Those people were bad-mouthing my wife. Shall we sue them?" he asked. Tyler just looked at him and raised an eyebrow. "You don't even know for sure that they're talking about your wife." But Tyler didn't get a chance to finish his statement because Brad had turned and walked away from him to catch up with the students. When he reached them, he stopped in front of them and his gaze fixed on the student's cell phone. When the students saw Brad, they gasped and almost stumbled. "Oh my God, you're so handsome!" they shrieked. And after a moment, thinking that the man in front of them was interested in one of them, they all started acting cute and coy to attract his attention. Brad didn't give any one of them a second glance. His gaze was still locked on the cell phone. Curious as to why the man was staring at her cell phone, one of the students asked, "Would you tell me why you're staring at my phone?" He just looked at her blankly and he asked, "Can I see that photo?" The students glanced at each other. "Photo?" one of them repeated, and the man nodded. "The photo of that power couple you were talking about," he said, and the girl immediately stretched out her phone toward him so he could see. "Oh, them. They're Haley and Leonard. Here. They're the current power couple in our university. Aren't they perfect together?" the girl said as she smiled at him sweetly. But the next second, as soon as the handsome man had seen the photo, his mood turned unbelievably cold, and the students inexplicably felt shivers down their spines. "This guy here is gay," Brad said as he pointed to Leonard. "So, they can't be together. Stop spreading false rumors." His voice was as ice cold as a glacier that froze them all in place, speechless. Brad then turned on his heels and walked away while the students remained rooted to the spot and scared half to death. As he witnessed this exchange, Tyler could only sigh. "You don't have to frighten people like that," he said when they were inside the car. "I didn't intend to." said Brad, and Tyler sighed again. It's just as I thought. This guy has only really softened towards his wife, but not much to anyone else. Also, you shouldn't have told them that Leonard is gay. That was supposed to be a secret, remember? Tyler said, but Brad didn't respond. He looked at Tyler as if he were saying he had no choice, and it was the truth anyways, which of course he did, and it wasn't. Let's go home, said Brad, but Tyler updated him on his wife's whereabouts and told him that she was already in school, so Brad said, let's go to her school. Episode 208, Role Reversal. Brad and Tyler had arrived at Columbia University. They were sitting inside the black car across from the university gate. Brad's gaze was focused intently on the school building, as though his eyes alone would be able to detect the whereabouts of his beloved wife. His chilling mood hadn't subsided, and he was becoming increasingly impatient. On the other hand, Tyler was grinning as he waited to see what Brad's next move would be. While he had the urge to storm the school building and find his wife, Brad nevertheless remained seated in the car. He was obviously eager to see Haley and also eager to please her, but he certainly didn't want to annoy or upset her. As he waited, he was becoming increasingly tense. Watching him, Tyler just bumped his head on the car window. Hey, why are we even here? He asked. He couldn't disguise his impatience any longer, but Brad just ignored him. Tyler sighed. If you're that jealous, at least admit to it or do something that'll make you feel better. Don't hold back. It's not good to bottle up your emotions, you know, Tyler informed him knowingly. Brad glanced at him before he finally spoke. There's no reason for me to get jealous. They were nothing but rumors, he said. Really? Tyler said and laughed. Your words and aura are completely at odds with each other, he said, and he continued to chuckle before patting Brad on the shoulder. You don't have to deny what's obvious, Brad. I know you trust your wife, and even though you know it's just a rumor, you can't help feeling jealous. Don't worry. That's natural, Tyler continued, and then he laughed even harder as if this was the funniest thing he had seen for a long time. Brad just glared at Tyler as he continued to be amused by his jealous reaction. Anyway, Tyler, he said suddenly, you still haven't introduced me to your fiancée. I heard that you fell in love with her at first sight, but because you lacked experience, she didn't like you. Brad said with a straight face, and Tyler almost choked. Who the hell told you that? He demanded, but Brad just calmly looked away and continued watching the school building. The old man. He asked me to lend you a hand, Brad said, and Tyler was about to respond when Brad continued. So, just let me know if you need any help or advice. Tyler couldn't think of anything at all to say to that. He was speechless. What? Is that the hint of an almost imperceptible smile on his face? Why do I feel like he's the one now teasing me? I don't believe it, thought Tyler. Tyler certainly hadn't expected Brad to give him advice, and he was lost for words while he thought about how he could retaliate. Then he had a bright idea. He picked up his phone and searched the internet for photos of the power couple. Wow, I had no idea Leonard and Miss Haley were this popular on the internet as a power couple, he exclaimed. Brad immediately snatched Tyler's cell phone from him. As Brad scrolled through the countless photos snapped of Leonard and Haley together with various sentimental captions, he exploded with anger. Tyler panicked when he saw that he was about to throw the cell phone out of the window and managed to snatch it back from him just in time. A second later, Brad had climbed out of the car and slammed the door behind him. He looked cool and calm as he stood leaning against the car, staring at the school building, but his dark aura and cold eyes betrayed his fury. Tyler watched him and wondered, maybe I went overboard. I had better try to rectify matters before all hell breaks loose. Inside the school building, Haley had just finished her test when her cell phone vibrated. She stood up, turned in her paper, and left the classroom before opening the message. She was surprised to see it was from Tyler, who had sent her a photo of Brad leaning on the car and staring intently at the school. The accompanying message was quite simple. SOS. Someone is about to explode with impatience. Haley's eyes widened and she started to run. Leonard had seen Haley leave in a hurry, so he handed in his own paper and ran after her. He was worried that there was something wrong. When he finally caught up with her, he asked, Miss Haley, why are you running? She slowed down to a fast walk and replied, He's here. Who's here? Is someone chasing her? An enemy? Leonard was confused. He looked behind him, but no one was chasing them, so he asked again, Who's here? And when she answered, Leonard almost stumbled over his own feet. My husband, she replied. My husband's here. And she began to move faster. Episode 209, Leonard Runs Away. Brad was still leaning against the car as he continued to glare at the school building. He had a sour expression on his face and an unpleasant feeling brewing inside him that he couldn't explain. But everything changed when he saw his wife appear at the gate. As soon as she laid eyes on him, her face lit up with a bright smile, and she ran toward him. Brad's cold and dark aura slowly lifted, and his eyes remained fixed on her until she was standing in front of him. Haley had just opened her mouth to speak, but before she had a chance, Tyler piped up from the other side of the car. "I'm sorry, Miss Haley, but Brad saw the photos of you and Leonard. He's wildly jealous, and now he wants to destroy the school and everyone in it," said Tyler. Just as he finished, Brad swung round to silence him with a glare, and Tyler clamped his hand over his mouth theatrically. Haley was stunned. She had seen the cold glare a moment ago, so she had realized that something might have happened, but she hadn't expected it might have been because of her. She had known about the photos but hadn't minded because they meant nothing. And besides, Brad knew Leonard was gay, so she hadn't thought it would be a problem. But looking at his miserable face, she began to feel guilty for causing him to feel jealous because she knew how unpleasant those feelings were. "I'm so sorry," she said sadly. Brad's eyes widened. He had never expected her to say sorry, nor did he want her to feel sorry. Seeing her sad face made him feel anxious, and he stepped forward to lean his forehead on her shoulder. "No, I'm the one who's sorry. I shouldn't feel jealous because I know there's no reason for me to get jealous," he apologized softly and sincerely. Her heart fluttered warmly when she heard his words spoken with honesty. She lifted her hand and gently stroked his cheek. Then she moved his face to look at her, and as soon as their eyes met, she smiled. "He's adorable. He looks just as cute as a puppy, and he's making my heart melt. I just want to cuddle him," she thought. "No, it's all right. I understand, okay? If I were in your shoes, I think I might feel the same," she admitted as she stroked his hair gently. Hearing these words, Brad visibly brightened. In the meantime, Tyler signaled to Leonard and beckoned him over toward the car. When Leonard reached him, they crouched down behind the car and Tyler began to speak. "Listen, young man, you had better not let our boss see your face right now. You're lucky his attention is focused on his wife and he hasn't noticed you yet. You're in big trouble," Tyler whispered as they hid like small children from their parents. "Why? What did I do? Did I do something wrong?" asked Leonard, completely clueless. Tyler just patted his shoulder as he sighed and then continued. "This might be hard, but you're just going to have to accept your fate, young man. You need to be the sacrificial lamb for the sake of the human race," Tyler explained, rather dramatically. Leonard had no clue what Tyler was prattling on about. "Okay, boss. Will you stop acting like an old man? You're only 2 years older than me, so stop treating me like a kid. And can you please speak English? I'm not fond of deciphering your riddles," Leonard complained. Tyler stood up and sighed. "Well, what I'm saying is this. Brad is extremely jealous, and someone told him that you and Haley have been dubbed the power couple, and then showed him photos of you and Haley together," he explained. Leonard went white and felt shivers up and down his spine. "Oh no, what should I do? So that's why he came here? Should I run now?" he asked, and Tyler just nodded. "If I were you, I would keep a low profile. I wouldn't show your face around him until he's calmed down," he advised. Leonard didn't need to be told twice. Without another word, he turned and ran without looking back, and Tyler, looking very pleased with himself, turned his attention toward the besotted couple across from him. Tyler immediately noticed that Brad's icy cold aura had not only lifted, but had disappeared completely, so he knew that the problem had already been solved. Worried that someone might snap a photo of Brad's face wearing his lifelike mask, he was about to suggest they all got inside the car when Haley turned to him. "Mr. Clark, is it safe if I take Brad somewhere for a while?" she asked sweetly. "May I know where, Miss Haley?" he asked. "Only to the park. It's only a couple of blocks away. I just wanted to buy him something," she answered. So the three of them then headed to the nearby park. When they arrived, Haley got out of the car and pulled Brad by the hand. She led him to a tree not far from where the vehicle was parked and asked him to wait for her there. She returned after only a few minutes. Tyler watched from the car and almost choked when he saw what Haley was carrying in her hands. Episode 210, Sitting in the Park. Moments before, Haley had told Brad he was so cute and adorable that he was melting her heart as if it were ice cream, and Brad had repeated the words ice cream with a nostalgic look on his face. When prompted, he explained he hadn't tasted ice cream since he was 6 years old, and that was what had led them to the park. Haley was fond of ice cream and had wanted Brad to taste her favorite homemade ice cream flavor that was sold at the park. But another reason why she had wanted to bring him to the park, instead of just ordering delivery, was that she had wanted him to experience one of the little things that fate had denied him. She thought that if she could just bring him here, they could spend a little time together without worrying about his safety. just like any other ordinary couple. She knew that Brad's situation made it next to impossible. Still, when the idea had crossed her mind, she decided she wanted to grab any opportunity that arose, even if it were only for a short time, just to let him have a taste of normal life. She just wanted to do something for him. While Brad leaned against the tree waiting for his wife to return, he watched couples and families spending their leisure time together without a care in the world. As he observed the everyday activities going on around him, it struck him that he and his wife would never experience the freedom of spending time together outside alone, without security. He realized just how unique their situation was. All these years, Brad had accepted his isolation. He had spent most of his life hiding away because it had been engraved in his mind that the outside world was a battlefield. He had always anticipated danger whenever he set foot outside his places of safety, so he had ended up getting used to remaining in the shadows. He hadn't pursued freedom, and neither had he yearned for it. But as he observed the people around him living simple, everyday lives, a feeling stirred inside him like the beginning of a storm. For the first time he could remember, he felt a desire to be like them, a desire to spend time freely with his wife without thinking about danger. He finally felt the need for freedom. As these thoughts were swirling around in his head, he spotted his wife approaching. She was smiling and carrying 3 ice creams. "Here, take this. I'll just take this one to Mr. Clark," she said, and Brad took one of the pink-colored ice creams. Haley quickly walked over to Tyler, who was leaning on the car. "Mr. Clark, here, this is for you," she said, and Tyler smiled broadly. "It's very kind of you to think of me, Miss Haley. Thank you," he said, genuinely grateful. She just laughed and walked back to the tree where her husband was waiting. When she reached her husband, she sat down on the grass and gestured for him to sit beside her. As they sat together in the shade of the tree, Haley started to eat her ice cream. She noticed that Brad hadn't touched his yet. "Taste it. It's good," she said, and Brad stared at the frozen treat while Haley waited for him to lick it. When Brad eventually took a lick, he put Haley in mind of a cat licking water, and she stifled a giggle. "Good," he said after a couple of super fast cat-like licks, and Haley chuckled. "My husband really is so adorable. I can't take it," she thought. She chuckled again, and they sat quietly and enjoyed their delicious strawberry ice cream cones. Then suddenly, Haley remembered something. That morning, on her way to school, she had come across an article about Brad's sensitivity to cold, and she had read that even eating cold foods could be dangerous. She couldn't believe she had already forgotten that, and she slapped her forehead with her palm. But Brad thought Haley had made the gesture because she was disappointed he was not eating the ice cream, so he started eating it quickly, even though he knew it would not be good for him. He just didn't want to disappoint her or make her unhappy, so he was surprised by her next words. "You can't eat cold foods, right? I'm really sorry, but I forgot. You don't have to eat it," she said with a worried look on her face. However, Brad felt that he was letting her down. "But you bought this for me. I refuse to throw it away," he said with an apologetic expression. "Don't worry about that. It won't go to waste. I'll eat it for you, okay?" she offered. "It's my favorite, after all." She smiled at him and Brad felt better instantly. So he held his cone while Haley continued eating hers. But Brad started to melt, and just as some of the strawberry ice cream was about to drip on his hand, Haley grabbed his hand and licked it before it fell. "I guess I have no choice but to eat them both at the same time," she said and grinned. She reached out to take Brad's ice cream from him when he stopped her. "That's fine. I'll hold it for you," he said, and Haley blushed. So Haley ate both at the same time, taking a lick from her own and then a lick from Brad's. Brad continued to watch her, and his line of sight was fixed on her lips. They were red and wet, and Brad could not avert his gaze. As Haley was alternating between the two, a tiny drop of pink cream remained on her upper lip. As she was about to lick it, Brad leaned forward, and his lips landed on hers and licked the strawberry ice cream away. Then he immediately backed away, and with the hand that wasn't holding the cone, he did that thing where he rubbed the back of his neck. Haley looked at him with wide eyes. "The ice cream is warm when it's on your lips," he said shyly, and Haley's face burned red. Episode 211, Brad Becomes Bold. "The ice cream feels warm on your lips," Brad said as he looked into his wife's eyes. Brad hadn't been aware of the effect his words were having. Neither had he realized that his wife had thought that what he had said had been bold, a little shameless even. But he had just said whatever came to mind and hadn't considered that what he had said had made Haley wonder where he had learned to talk like that. And Haley had been caught off guard by Brad's words. She had tried to snap back to reality, but she had been surprised by such a change in Brad. He really was the last person she expected to speak like that. My Brad seems to be changing. If he were a robot, I would say he was getting an upgrade. But the big mystery is, how did he learn to speak like that? She wondered. Where did you learn that? She stuttered. Who taught you to do that? she said without thinking, but as soon as the words had left her mouth, she turned even redder, and when Brad heard what she said, he started to feel panic inside. Oh no, what am I saying? Have I said something wrong? He thought. Haley bit her lower lip to stop herself from saying anything further without thinking it through first, but she felt a little alarmed. This was not like Brad. She didn't know why, but she felt a twinge of disappointment when she imagined him becoming bolder and brasher. She realized she loved his cuteness and adorability, and was worried it might fade. Who taught me? He repeated as he stared at her. You did, he said simply. You taught me. Haley looked at him in utter astonishment. Me? But when did I teach you? She asked as her face burned even redder. Well, the thing is, I was just watching you, and before I knew it, I did that, he explained, and then he looked away like a shy child. Didn't you like it? He continued in a small voice as he continued to avoid her gaze. Looking at him at that moment made Haley realize that he would always be adorable in her eyes, no matter what he did. She smiled and patted his head. Of course I liked it. I think I like both cute and adorable Brad, as well as bold and brazen Brad, she said without thinking, and she smiled at him warmly. Brad's face brightened the moment he heard her positive response. However, he didn't fully grasp the meaning of everything she had said, and was about to ask her what she meant when Haley cried out in alarm. Oh no, the ice creams are melting! She squealed and immediately began licking both ice creams a little faster. Of course, Brad's gaze fell to her lips again. When she noticed Brad was fixated on something, Haley mistakenly believed he was preoccupied with the ice cream and longed to taste some more. She was dismayed that his condition prevented him from eating the cold treat, so she tried to cheer him up. I'm sorry. Even though I bought this for you, I'm the only one who can enjoy it. But don't worry, I'll make you some warm and delicious food at home, she said. Maybe I should experiment and try to make some warm ice cream for you? She gazed up at the sky as if wondering how she could create such a dish. Brad saw she was deep in thought. It's all right. You don't have to trouble yourself, he said, and Haley just smiled. No, I'll try when I have time, she said before returning to her task of eating both ice creams before they melted completely. It's no fun eating this alone. I would much rather be sharing it with you, she said. And I've given it some thought. I don't think it's possible to make warm ice cream. Soon she had finished Brad's ice cream, and as she turned her attention to her own, his hand suddenly landed on the back of her neck, and he pulled her toward him. The next second, he kissed her. His warm tongue entered her mouth. Haley's eyes nearly popped out of her head, and she almost dropped her cone. He kissed her as passionately as before, but Haley felt it was a little different this time. It felt as though he was savoring the taste of her mouth. It was driving her crazy. When he finally pulled away from her, her mind was swirling like a tornado. They stared at each other as though stunned. Surprisingly, he was the first to speak. I'm not worried if I can't eat ice cream. I can always taste it this way, right? He said in all seriousness, without a trace of embarrassment. On the other hand, Haley was so embarrassed that her face started to turn red. But what? But what are you saying? She stuttered. He just looked at her in confusion. But you said you liked it when I did it before, he answered in a small, worried voice. Haley put down her ice cream on the grass and covered her face with her palms. Brad, you're shameless, she said from behind her hands. He froze in place, petrified that he had said or done something wrong. Episode 212, Crossed Wires. Brad had been taken aback by the words Haley had said. He hadn't believed it was a good thing to be accused of being shameless, and it had made him very nervous. The fact that she had covered her face had just made him worry more. He didn't know how to react. He lifted his hand, but then dropped it again. He didn't know what to do or what to say, particularly as this had been the first time his wife had behaved in such a way. He was at a loss as to what to do for the best. He knew how to console her when she was sad or hurt, but this time she appeared to be angry and upset, so much that she had called him shameless. What do I do in this situation? She seems angry. Maybe I should just apologize, he thought. I'm sorry, he said simply, his face full of regret. Haley was slowly recovering from the shock of Brad's unexpected move. She peeked at him between her fingers when she heard his apology. She saw the regret in his eyes and the worry etched in his face. He had the look of a small boy who had done something very bad and was about to beg for forgiveness. Now it was Haley's turn to feel confused. She hadn't expected him to look so miserable. She had covered her face because she hadn't wanted him to see how embarrassed she was. She had called him shameless because she had been flustered, but most of all, she had been surprised. She had found it a little shameless because it was Brad, her supposedly innocent husband, who not so long ago had asked her to teach him how to French kiss. Wait, why is he looking like this? Have I misunderstood something? Or has he? She wondered. Haley was just about to ask Brad why he looked so forlorn and apologetic when her cell phone rang, and she noticed it was Mr. Rio, her old professor. At the same time, Tyler was walking toward them, so Haley gestured to Brad that she would take the call. Meanwhile, Tyler sidled over to Brad and whispered something in his ear. Haley answered his call. "Hello, Mr. Rio?" said Haley when she answered. Mr. Rio was very fond of Haley. He had helped her with her scholarship exam to Columbia University, always praised her, and told others she was an exceptional student.
"Where are you? The next test is about to start,"
he said in his loud and strict voice. "Yes, Professor, I'll be right there," she said before she hung up. Then she turned to Brad and said, "The next test is about to begin, so I need to go back now. I can finish it within 40 minutes, so..." But Tyler interrupted her. "It's okay, Miss Haley. We'll take you back now," he said, and they all climbed back in the car. In the car, Haley looked across at Brad sitting quietly next to her. She was about to say something, but Tyler spoke first. "Brad still has work to do, so we'll have to go straight home after we drop you off," he said, and Haley agreed. "That's okay. I'll take a cab home with Leonard afterward," she said, and when she turned to look at Brad again, she was a little taken aback. His apologetic expression from earlier had suddenly changed. He was no longer the little lost boy, but now seemed to be focusing every ounce of his senses toward a certain approaching danger. Haley was quietly surprised by the sudden change in Brad's demeanor, and then she remembered that Tyler had whispered something to Brad while they were still in the park, and Haley had taken the call from the professor. She deduced it must have been something very serious and decided not to pry. Episode 213. He let his guard down. After Haley had stepped out of the car and had safely entered the school gates, the car began to speed away. Tyler's demeanor changed, and he unleashed the same aura that had exuded from Brad on hearing what Tyler had told him in the park. Brad, on the other hand, breathed a deep sigh of relief. When Haley had taken the call from her professor, Tyler had told Brad about the presence of FBI agents. Brad had immediately panicked. He was usually calm in these situations, but he was terrified that the FBI might come after him while he was in the presence of his wife. But thankfully, nothing had happened. "Did they see us?" Brad asked. Tyler answered without looking at him. "I don't believe they did. Otherwise, they would be chasing us by now. I think they have another target, and we just happen to cross paths with each other," Tyler explained. Brad's aura began to darken again, and he clenched his fists. "I've let my guard down." Tyler sighed. "Well, it can't be helped. You were sick last night, and you didn't have the chance to check on them before we left," he said, but Brad didn't seem very happy. Tyler sighed again. He's blaming himself again. He could only watch Brad, knowing that he was deep in thought, visualizing what might have happened, different scenarios and methods of escape, and how to best protect his wife in the event something catastrophic happened. He knew just how much of a perfectionist Brad was when it came to this type of thing. Ever since he had been a boy, his mind had always been occupied, almost operating in a completely different dimension, so that he could outsmart any assassination plots and high-level attacks by always being one step ahead of the game, often several steps ahead. And his hacking skills meant that he had always managed to uncover and foil any mission, no matter how high-level and top secret, long before their enemies had had an opportunity even to get started. As long as he didn't let his guard down, had no distractions, and listened to Tyler, nothing could touch him. "Anyway, I can't believe you're now getting a bit bolder, Brad." Tyler was now back to his mischievous self, as he was certain the danger had passed. It was almost as though nothing had happened. Brad began to blush when Tyler began to tease him, and his aura turned cold when he remembered what had happened and what had been said after that kiss in the park. "Oh, did something happen?" Tyler asked when he saw Brad's expression and his red face. "I expected him to turn as red as a tomato, but why is he so cold?" Tyler was curious to know what was causing this odd reaction. "Aren't you supposed to be happy that you're now the one making moves on her?" he continued in an attempt to get Brad to open up. Finally, Brad spoke. "She called me bold, brazen, and shameless," he said with a voice full of dejection. Tyler looked wide-eyed at him and then burst out laughing. Eventually, he responded, "What? She called you shameless? What the hell did you do to her for her to call you that?" Tyler asked as he continued laughing, while Brad just looked out the window. "I don't think she was very happy with me. She even covered her face to avoid looking at me. I think I've made the wrong move," Brad explained, with his usual candor and honesty. This just made Tyler laugh even harder. "You must have just misunderstood something again, Brad. I'm sure of it. I would advise you not to jump to any conclusions. And besides, what's wrong if she called you shameless?" he said, and Brad looked at him with a puzzled gaze. Tyler then sidled up to him and whispered in his ear, "Listen, Brad, sometimes a woman actually likes it when her man is being bold," Tyler said, but Brad just looked at him doubtfully. "I think your wife was just embarrassed and caught off guard. That's why she covered her face. If you don't believe me, ask her yourself. Or you could just do something bold again and check her reactions for yourself," Tyler continued while Brad just remained silent. Tyler waited for a little longer, but when Brad still didn't respond, he said, "Anyway, what's your plan?" Brad remained quiet as he gazed out the window. Oh, don't tell me you'll just give her the ring just like that. She professed her love for you in such a breathtakingly romantic way, so don't even think about doing something boring, okay? He warned. You have to work as hard as she did. In fact, you're going to have to go one better. Shut up. I already have a plan. Episode 214, Missed Training Session. After her giving her test, Haley was in a cubicle in the ladies' restroom. She was about to unlock the door when she heard voices gossiping about her and Leonard, so she remained where she was and listened intently. Seriously? Someone said that Leonard, the Adonis, is gay? Yes, according to them, it was a freakishly handsome guy who told them. He just walked up to them in the street. Can you believe it? And now the news is spread around the entire campus. Wow, seriously? But that guy must have been lying, right? I would have never guessed Leonard is gay. What if the guy who said it wanted to start a false rumor because he had something against Leonard? Well, I suppose that's possible, but actually it makes sense if you think about it. What do you mean by that? What are you trying to say? Well, every time I see him with Haley, he's very sweet and gentle. Maybe he's a woman in disguise. This was followed by laughter. And don't you find it a bit suspicious that he doesn't have any friends at all? He always just sticks to Haley like glue. Did you guys ever notice that? Yes, now that you mention it, he does act suspicious sometimes. And he definitely doesn't behave too manly around Haley. And his face. He's just too pretty. Maybe he is actually a woman. It's happened in novels, right? Hey, stop it. How could he be a woman? You're not making any sense at all. That's how rumors start. You should be careful. But it is actually possible, right? And besides, have they ever admitted that they're in a relationship? I don't think they have. Maybe they're hiding something. No, I don't believe he's gay, and he's absolutely not a woman. What if he is gay? Just because he's really handsome and you really like him doesn't mean he can't be gay, right? What if he is gay and just doesn't think it's important or doesn't want everyone to know? That's his right to being private. I suppose, but I'm still curious. Why don't we just go and ask Haley? Okay, but I don't think it's got anything to do with anyone apart from Leonard. Listening from the cubicle, Haley was shocked. She couldn't believe that not only was Leonard's secret exposed, but now rumors were starting that he was a woman. Oh no, how did they even... Wait, who the hell is this freakishly handsome guy who revealed the secret? Has Leonard already heard about this? Haley wondered. She stepped out of the restroom, still thinking about Leonard and expecting him to be waiting for her, but he was nowhere to be found. This got her worried. Meanwhile, Leonard was around the corner, surrounded by a bunch of male students who were giving him the third degree. So... You're actually gay? One of the students asked with a sneer on his face, and some of the other students laughed. What if he is, guys? There's nothing wrong with that. It's not 1965 anymore. That sort of attitude is so last century. One of the other students reasoned. To be honest, being gay actually suits him. He's too pretty to be a man. Another said before raising his hand. He was about to touch Leonard's face, but Leonard was too quick for him and caught hold of his arm before they could figure out what had happened. Leonard gripped the student's hand hard, but he dropped it like a hot potato when he saw Haley approaching. As soon as he set eyes on Haley, his face lit up and he smiled sweetly. The students looked on in confusion. Even though Leonard wasn't very happy with the turn of events, he was loyal to the core. He would never compromise his mission as a result of the gossip or the opinion of people who didn't matter to him. He was happy to be mistaken as gay if that was the only way he could remain close to Haley and protect her. And besides, there was also the small matter of his boss's wrath, and he did not want to risk getting on the wrong side of Brad. Leonard? What are you doing? Haley's voice rang out loudly, and everyone turned to look at her. The other students softened the moment they saw her. Haley had many admirers among the male students in the university. They automatically made way for her to reach Leonard. Leonard didn't change his expression. He was focused on trying to convince Haley that everything was fine and that he wasn't bothered by the gossip now spreading through the school. Leonard, have you heard the rumors? She asked, and Leonard just laughed. Yeah, I've heard, but please don't mind them, he replied. However, Haley's brow creased into a frown, and she didn't look very happy about it at all. She moved closer to him and began to whisper in his ear. How about we sort these rumors out in front of everyone? I know you wanted to keep it a secret, but it seems to be out now. How about we just show everyone that being gay doesn't mean you're different or weak or a pushover? You know how some people are bullies, even in these so-called enlightened modern times. Once she had finished speaking, Leonard just looked at her wide-eyed and confused. You might not know this, but you look really cool when you're fighting. I think if everyone saw you like that, I don't think anyone would bully you. She continued, but Miss Haley, don't worry about me. This is no big deal. Honestly, Leonard said as he tried to reassure her. But she seemed determined to help him deal with this problem. It seemed that the problem wasn't so much that people knew he was gay, but that they saw him as a weak man or feminine because of his devastating good looks. Haley knew that she could resolve this with ease. No, this was your secret and now it is out. I can't let you be treated like this when you don't like it. We need to deal with it now before it gets out of hand. Don't worry, I'll be your opponent. We failed to practice this morning, so how about we do the serious training now? She suggested. Leonard was a little flustered. But, Miss Haley, you don't need to do this. I'm seriously fine. If you don't let me help you, I don't think we can be friends, and I won't want to spend any time with you, she whispered, and his shoulders sagged. Well, if that happens, it would be much harder for me to protect her. I have no choice, he thought. Leonard reluctantly agreed, and with a confident smile, Haley turned to face the male students. Leonard and I usually have a training session every morning. We missed our session this morning, so we're going to practice now. Feel free to watch, she said with a wide smile. The male students just looked at each other and then nodded eagerly. Episode 215, Public Training Session. After Haley had changed her outfit, she and Leonard were finally ready to face each other, and they proceeded to the yard behind the science department building. News of their public training session spread like wildfire, and in no time at all, Haley and Leonard were surrounded by a horde of curious and gossiping students. What's going on? Are they really going to fight? No, Haley just said they're going to practice. She said it's their daily routine. Seriously? Their daily routine? Well, that's what she said. It seems like he's her sparring partner or something. What? Seriously? Oh my god, this is so interesting. Isn't it? Who do you think will win? I think Haley will win. I heard she was really good at Taekwondo back in high school. Really? Now that's amazing. I can't even begin to imagine someone like Haley being good at fighting. But if that's true, then I think Leonard will lose badly. Yeah, he's too skinny, and he's a very handsome boy. He doesn't really look as if he has it in him to beat someone who's had training. And of course, there's the rumor that he's gay. Hey, looks can be deceptive. He might be a trained fighter and be really strong. Whether or not he's gay won't make any difference. Easy now. Why don't we just watch them first instead of listening to you squabbling? Yeah, all right, but hear me out. If Leonard loses this fight, I swear, I'll believe he's gay even if he denies it. Girls really are scary. How could you decide just like that? Does it matter? Shut up. Let's just watch. While the students continued gossiping amongst themselves, Leonard remained hesitant. He'd always fought Haley seriously each time they had training, and he knew that Haley had improved a great deal and was now on a different level compared to the first time they had fought. However, Leonard was reluctant to demonstrate his skills to everyone. Miss Haley, let's take it easy this time, okay? He whispered before they started, but to his surprise, her answer wasn't a word, but an impressive jump kick aimed at his jaw. Thankfully, Leonard reflexively avoided the move easily, as usual, and both their first moves made every student's mouth hang open with awe. It was an impressive start that captured the students' attention from the outset. Haley then continued to attack Leonard as she usually did, with strength, skill, and speed, and Leonard defended himself expertly. Haley had improved in leaps and bounds since their first encounter. Her every move required his undivided attention in order to ensure that he deflected each attack. The gossiping and bickering of a moment ago had died down completely, and all the onlookers stood silently awed by the unexpectedly high level of skill they were witnessing. They almost felt like they were watching a movie. Leonard defended himself from every ferocious attack, and he remained calm but swift. He never once attacked Haley, never once retaliated, but his skill was unmistakable. His absolute concentration and focus made everyone, male and female student alike, watch in unadulterated admiration. Even though Leonard was skinny but handsome, he clearly had excellent fighting skills. The spectators also admired Haley's talent. She brought to mind a warrior princess trained to lead an army in times of war. After a few minutes, Haley stopped to rest and have a drink of water. She was planning to fight a little longer to enable Leonard to further showcase his superb fighting skills, but before they could start up again, their audience started to applaud, as they would at the end of an amazing show. Haley and Leonard turned their heads toward the crowd and were surprised to see the same students whose eyes were filled with doubt and disdain only moments before were now filled with nothing but admiration. Haley looked at Leonard with a smile, and her eyes seemed to say, "See, it's as easy as that." Wow, Haley, you're so badass. Leonard, you're amazing, so cool. After the exhilarating performance, it seemed as though the students' doubts had vanished. Male and female students alike treated Leonard with a renewed respect, and Haley felt as if she had won a little victory. Now, no one cared whether or not Leonard was gay, and they had quashed a few stereotypes while they were at it. See that? No one cares anymore. Everyone thinks you're cute and cool, she said happily in the taxi on the way home. Yes, you're right, Leonard agreed. But who do you suppose is the guy who exposed your secret? And why did he need to do that? Do you know someone who has a grudge against you? Have you done anything to upset anyone that you can remember? She asked. Someone who has a grudge against me and someone who knows I'm gay. I wonder who that could be, he sighed. Leonard knew that the person she was talking about was his jealous boss, her jealous husband. He felt a shiver down his spine when he thought about what would happen if Brad found out about what his wife did just to help Leonard out after the rumor Brad started. Leonard went quiet as he didn't know what to say. They traveled in silence for a while until Haley's soft voice murmured, I miss Brad. I wish we were home already. Then she leaned her head on the car window. Leonard looked at her in surprise. It's only been a little more than an hour, and you're missing him already? Oh dear. People in love really have their own world people like me will never understand, he mused. Leonard was quietly chuckling to himself. He had been single all his life, and although he had met countless women who had shown interest in him and even professed their love for him, for some reason, he hadn't really been attracted to any of them. Of course, he wanted to fall in love one day, but it was too bad for him that he hadn't yet met the woman of his dreams. As he thought about it, he looked out the window and let out a long sigh. Haley looked at him and asked, What's wrong? Leonard's head snapped around. He looked at her a little startled and then smiled. Nothing, But he couldn't finish his statement. He grabbed Haley and pulled her toward him. The next second, there was a loud bang. Episode 216. Precautions. Within a matter of seconds, an intense blow hit Cab, and Haley felt her body slam forward into Leonard. Before she knew it, her face was buried in his chest, and his arms were wrapped around her head. The collision happened so quickly that Haley was shocked, and she couldn't move for a while. Her senses quickly recovered, and she lifted her head. Leonard sensed that the danger had passed and slowly released her. Are you all right? He asked anxiously. She didn't respond, looking at him with wide eyes. Blood was flowing from his neck. You're bleeding! She yelled, but before he could utter another word, the driver screamed for help. Disregarding his own wounds, Leonard quickly inspected Haley for any serious injuries. Apart from the small cuts on her hand, she wasn't wounded. Leonard was thankful that the impact wasn't lethal and that he managed to protect her. He couldn't even imagine what would have happened if she had been badly hurt. Once he knew she was safe, he went to check on the driver. Haley was about to call for help when the police arrived. Paramedics immediately went to check on the wounded driver and Leonard. They decided the two men needed to go to the hospital. Before Haley could get in the ambulance to go with Leonard, the police stopped her. The officer said she needed to go with them to the station and answer some questions about the accident. The rain was falling heavily, and Haley felt uneasy leaving Leonard behind, but she wasn't sure that she had a choice. Remove these, right now, Brad ordered Tyler. His voice echoed off the wall. Brad had a look of severe anguish on his face as he glared at Tyler with a murderous rage. As soon as Brad received news of the accident, Tyler had handcuffed him inside his study. He had the foresight to know that Brad would likely rush to the scene recklessly, so without hesitation, he restrained him inside the house. You know why I'm doing this, Tyler explained. Haley was brought to the police station, and there's a strong possibility that this could involve you. Don't worry, she wasn't hurt. Leonard did his job excellently, so calm down. Even with Tyler's reassurance, Brad's expression didn't change. His face looked even angrier. It felt like the whole room had turned ice cold. Don't make me repeat myself. Brad's horrifying voice thundered once again. However, Tyler didn't budge. He just stared right back at Brad. His eyes reflected his firm resolve. If you go and something bad happens, you know I might not be able to save both of you. Stop being so stubborn, Brad. I know you understand what I'm saying, Tyler explained. Besides, they are obviously trying to lure you into the open. They want something from you. If you go out there now, you'll just confirm their suspicions. They'll know how much she means to you. Stay here and wait. I'll make sure they don't harm a single hair on her head. Tyler's voice was steadfast. Without waiting for a reply, he moved out of the room. He looked over and saw Alan and 3 more guards in front of the door. Whatever happens, do not do what he says, Tyler ordered the men. They almost cringed when they saw the terrifying warning in his eyes. Even if we wanted to do what the boss asks, Alan replied, there's nothing we can do. You have the keys. They weren't ordinary handcuffs. They were reinforced and could never be forced open. Tyler had designed them specifically for times like this when Brad needed to be restrained. It was for his own good, and he had only had to use them twice before. Ken will be here soon, Tyler added. Alan cringed hearing the name. Why does he need to be here? He thought with contempt. Tyler glanced back at Brad before he left the room. He hadn't moved a muscle. As Tyler was hastily leaving the house, a mysterious man marched up to him. He had the discipline of someone trained in the military. As soon as Tyler saw him, his expression relaxed. I handcuffed him inside. I will leave the rest up to you, Tyler said before he tossed the key to the man. Yes, sir, the man replied with a respectful nod. Tyler rushed to the car and got in. Episode 217, Interrogation. How is she? Tyler asked into the phone. He was speeding toward the Greenport police station. She's fine. She's just in the middle of questioning, the voice on the phone replied. If anyone tries to harm her, you know what to do, Tyler warned. Yes, I understand. But boss, I should tell you that there are FBI agents here. They're acting suspiciously, like they want something from her. I know. Stay alert, Tyler added, and then he hung up the phone. Will do, but the call was over before he could finish responding. Tyler gripped his phone hard. He had a strong feeling that the FBI agents were the ones responsible for the accident. They wanted a reason to question Haley without rousing suspicion from anyone. He started to realize that the agent's target had likely been Haley all along, not Brad. His eyes narrowed as he wondered what they might want from her. Meanwhile, Haley was sitting quietly inside the interrogation room. The police officer showed her a photo of a woman. The woman was beautiful, and she was wearing a white coat. As Haley stared at the picture, an inexplicable feeling of recognition crept over her. Have you ever seen this woman? The officer asked. She stared at Haley with a scrutinizing gaze. It was as if she was trying to read her every thought through her body language. Haley shook her head honestly. She didn't know why she was being asked about some stranger. She was certain that she had never seen the woman before in her entire life. But she still couldn't shake the strange feeling. After a long silence, the police officer showed her another picture. How about him? Have you ever seen anyone that looks like this boy? The woman asked as Haley looked at the second photo. This time, it was a photo of a young boy around 11 or 12 years old. Haley was surprised at how adorable the boy was, even though the photo was in black and white. The boy had a face that seemed to be photoshopped. It was flawless. As soon as Haley looked at his eyes, she felt another feeling of familiarity, but she couldn't figure out why. She felt some connection to this boy, even though it was her first time seeing him. Despite this strange feeling, Haley shook her head again. The two police officers looked at each other in silence and then stepped out of the room. After a few more minutes, they finally allowed Haley to leave. Haley was intrigued about the significance of the two people in the photos she was shown. She didn't know why she felt a connection to them, even though she didn't know who they were. In the end, she decided that they were likely missing persons, and the police were randomly asking people if they had seen them. When Haley stepped out of the police station, she felt the freezing wind through her wet clothes. She'd already been drenched from the heavy rain when the police took her. She had been feeling cold for a while now. Haley wrapped her arms around herself and stared up at the gloomy sky. She sneezed twice, and then suddenly, someone draped a coat over her shoulders. She turned around and was surprised to see that it was Tyler. Mr. Clark, what are you doing here? Wait, is Brad here too? She asked. He just ruffled her hair affectionately. He's not here. I came to get you. I'm afraid Brad might die with worry if you don't come home immediately, he said before he hastily led her toward the car. As soon as they entered, he began to talk again. Are you all right? He asked, and she nodded. I'm fine, but how about Leonard? Tyler gave her a look of reassurance. He's fine. I already sent someone to pick him up, he said. She heaved a long sigh of relief. I wanted to thank him for saving me, she said. Tyler just smiled at her again. You can do that when he gets back, he replied, and she nodded. Tyler continued asking Haley about what had happened as their car sped down the street. They reached the mansion in record-breaking time. Haley stepped out of the car, expecting to see Brad anxiously waiting for her. To her dismay, guards and a terrifying-looking man were the first to welcome her. She halted and looked around as Tyler spoke. Ken, didn't you get my message to uncuff him? He asked. But suddenly Alan appeared with a look of horror on his face. He stepped over to Ken and gave the keys back to him. I'm sorry, Ken. You better be the one to go and uncuff the boss, Alan said, his voice filled with fear. Ken shook his head and threw the keys back to him without saying a word. Alan looked like he was going to cry. I can't even bear to enter the room. The boss is in a terrible mood. I'm afraid he might kill me before I even have the chance to unlock the handcuffs. Suddenly, he noticed that Tyler was standing behind Ken, so he ran over and tossed him the keys. You're the one who handcuffed him, so you can be the one to release him, Alan said. Seeing the look in Alan's eyes, Tyler looked down at the keys with hesitation. Is it really that bad? He asked. Alan nodded his head intensely. You have no idea, he cried out. He looks like he's ready to kill the first person who gets close to him. Alan walked away before Tyler could argue. He scratched his head as he watched the man walk away. Tyler tried to imagine the things Brad would do when he finally got free. A shiver ran down his spine. He was trying to decide what to do when Haley, who was just quietly standing behind him, suddenly sneezed. He turned to her as understanding dawned on him. My hero, he thought with relief. He knew that seeing her was the only thing that would calm Brad down right now. He also knew that he would never hurt her, no matter how intense his anger was. He walked over to her and put the keys in her hand. I told you a while ago that I handcuffed him, right? Tyler asked. Here's the key. He's waiting for you inside his study. Haley nodded impatiently and immediately ran inside the house. Tyler was watching her enter the mansion when he heard Alan's voice behind him. You really are despicable. How could you sacrifice her just to save yourself? He asked, smiling. Tyler just laughed. Sacrifice? Don't be an idiot, Alan. What's the most powerful piece in a chess game? Isn't it the queen that takes down the king? He chuckled. Besides, sending Haley to rescue him might make for a romantic reunion, don't you think? Alan didn't have a chance to reply as Tyler began to walk toward the front door. Alan shook his head slightly. I wonder how Brad is going to react, he thought. Episode 218, Reunion. When Haley pushed open the door, her eyes immediately searched for her husband. When she saw him, he looked terrifying. He was standing in the corner of the room, frozen in place like a statue. His cuffed hands were closed in tight fists. Anyone would be scared just to look at him. But Haley didn't feel any fear at all. Seeing him like that made her heart feel anxious, and she ran to him. Brad heard footsteps approaching and raised his head. His eyes were ghastly and bloodshot. He looked like some sort of chained-up monster. His fiery eyes seemed to glimmer in the dimly lit room, but as soon as he recognized who was coming closer to him, everything changed. The bloodlust and rage he had been feeling evaporated like a fine mist. Haley jumped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a loving embrace. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt very exhausted. She felt like all she wanted was to hug him and be comforted by him. After a long hug with her husband, Haley's energy was recharged. She pulled away and looked up at him. I'm home, she said with a big smile. Brad finally relaxed. After seeing her, all his negative emotions vanished into thin air. It was as if he had magically transformed from a raging monster into a newborn baby. Brad gazed at her pretty face for a while before he finally moved. He stepped forward, but he was held back by something. He had forgotten about the handcuffs. Anger started to rise inside him again, and then Haley gasped. Oh my, she said in surprise. I almost forgot. I have the key. She immediately uncuffed him. As soon as he was free, Brad embraced her as tight as he could before he held her shoulders and looked her up and down. Are you all right? Are you hurt? Did they touch you? He asked worriedly. His emotions were a mix of anxiety and rage. He was ready to kill everyone on the planet if any harm had come to his beloved wife. Haley noticed the horrifying look in his eyes. She smiled softly and her hand pinched his cheek to calm him. He still remained anxious, so she raised her other hand and pinched his other cheek. She wanted to show him that everything was all right and ease all his worries. Brad still seemed perturbed. Lately, Haley had found it quite easy to relax him. All it took was a small gesture of affection. It didn't seem to be working this time, and his demeanor shocked her. She needed to try harder, so she pulled his face toward her own. Their faces were so close that they could feel each other's breath. She gazed lovingly into his eyes. Their lips were about to touch when suddenly, Haley turned her face to the side and sneezed. Brad shook his head in surprise. Are you all right? He asked. Haley, still holding his face, turned to look at him again. I wanted to kiss you, but I think I caught a cold. I don't want you to get sick, she said, letting go of his cheeks and moving one hand to play with his hair. She didn't expect what Brad would say next. I don't mind. I want to catch your cold. Episode 219. Don't know unless you try. I want to catch your cold. Haley repeated Brad's words over and over in her head. She was so surprised that she didn't know what to say. She coughed, and her face turned red like a ripe tomato. Haley still wasn't used to him being so forward. However, as soon as she looked into his eyes again, the rosy hue of her cheeks began to fade. Brad wasn't looking at her in a lustful way. His breathtakingly gorgeous eyes were just filled with worry and pure concern. He didn't say those words just so he could kiss her. Instead, he said them because he didn't want her to suffer alone. Realizing that she might have originally misinterpreted his words, she decided to confirm if she was right. Are you saying that it's totally fine for you to catch my cold as long as you can kiss me? She said, as serious as ever. Her bold attitude might also be because she was starting to develop a mild fever. I want to kiss you, and I also don't want you to get sick, he said truthfully. Haley smiled. So, she thought, part of him is being sweet, while the other part is just naughty. She was surprised at how comfortable Brad was getting at flirting and being romantic. What will he do next? She wondered. She covered her face with her hands in an attempt to shield him from her thoughts. She couldn't stop her mind from fantasizing about where this could lead. Brad, with this strange mixture of cute innocence and shamelessness, could cause her to lose control. She imagined herself fainting from his charm, and she imagined him kissing her deeply and passionately. Her knees began to feel weak. She knew that the only thing she could do in a moment like that would be to surrender herself to him. Meanwhile, Brad, who had been waiting for her to reply, was starting to become anxious when he saw her cover her face. He remembered what had happened when they were at the park, and she had covered her face after he kissed her. He wondered if she liked it when he made a bold move, or if it made her feel uncomfortable. The words Tyler had told him echoed in his brain. Sometimes girls actually like it when their man makes the first move. Your wife was just embarrassed before. If you don't believe me, just try it again and see her reaction the next time. Brad stared at her intently. He never wanted to displease her. He never wanted to do anything that could turn her off. That's why he was always doing his best to learn about the things she likes, as well as the things she hates. But he was still having a tough time figuring out the real meaning behind her actions. Just as Tyler had said, he thought that the only way for him to know for sure was to let the actions speak for themselves. You never know unless you try, he reminded himself. Brad started to move. He grabbed Haley's hand, causing her to look up at him again. They stared deep into each other's eyes once more, but after a few short moments, Haley averted her gaze. I forgot to return this coat, she said suddenly, remembering the jacket that Tyler had draped over her shoulders. Brad also looked at the jacket. Then he released her hand and let out a disappointed sigh. He recognized that it was Tyler's coat, and he started to feel strangely jealous, even though he knew he should be thanking his friend for the kindness. Let me go return this first, okay? She said as she started walking away. She was just about to open the door when Brad suddenly grabbed the coat from her hand and slammed his palm on the door, closing it loudly. Her eyes went wide with surprise. She stared at his hand on the door before she slowly turned. The moment she faced him, she gasped. Episode 220, Language of Love. The moment Haley turned, she gasped at how close her face was to Brad's. His lips brushed the tip of her nose, causing her to reflexively lean back against the door to try and create some distance between them. Her reaction made him hesitate. He didn't expect her to get startled like that, and he started to feel a little anxious. Did I scare you? He asked with a dejected look. She just blinked and stared at him. She still wasn't used to him having such a direct approach. His actions had brought back memories from her past. She had experienced people treating her like this before, so it was instinctual for her to be a little hesitant. If other men had been too forward with her, they usually got a knee to the groin. Thankfully, she reminded herself that this was Brad, and she had no intention of denying him. While she was still thinking about how to react, Brad's anxiety was increasing. Her silence and seemingly troubled look made him feel unsure. I'm sorry, he uttered before he lowered his face. She was surprised again, not because of his sudden apology, but because of his looming anxiety and sadness. He leaned his head on his arm that was still stretched toward the door. Please tell me if I'm doing things you don't like, he said in an agonizing voice. He didn't bother to raise his head. The scene gave her a sharp, twisting feeling in her heart. This was the first time Brad had spoken to her without making eye contact. She could tell he was feeling awful. Watching him be so sad and anxious was painful for her too. She couldn't stand it any longer. She wanted to give all her love to him, and she wanted to guard his heart so that he would never get hurt again. She held his head and leaned on his shoulder. Then she wrapped her arm around his head as she caressed his hair gently. Would you believe me if I told you that you've never displeased me? Not even once? She asked, and he immediately raised his head. He gazed into her eyes before answering. I always believe everything you say, he replied. When Haley smiled brightly, Brad's eyes lit up. Did I misunderstand you again? He continued. She nodded with a sweet smile, causing him to freeze. I'm sorry if I made you feel bad because of my actions, she explained. Before I met you, some idiots would sometimes try to make a move on me. That's why I reacted like that. It was just a reflex. Nothing personal. Worry and rage flashed across Brad's face. Don't worry, she said reassuringly. I can take care of myself. They all ended up on the floor before they could lay a hand on me. She chuckled and looked quite proud of herself. Brad's expression softened, but he still didn't seem happy. I would have destroyed them, he said, and Haley could only force out a laugh. Don't worry so much. Those idiots don't deserve your time or attention. Besides, I think I taught them their lesson. Forget about those jerks, she said. After a short silence, Brad nodded. Haley smiled again as she raised herself up on her toes and caressed his hair. Misunderstandings are inevitable in relationships. They're bound to happen in the future, but I want to tell you that whatever you do, you're never going to displease me. Her beautiful eyes were overflowing with sincerity. Her words made him speechless, and his heart started to beat rapidly. While she was busy caressing his hair, he moved his face closer to hers. His lips were about to reach hers when she suddenly turned her face away and sneezed again. A long silence followed before she could talk. I'm sorry, Brad. Not this time, okay? You just recovered from a fever last night. I can't make you get sick again, she said and pinched both of his cheeks again. I'll go and get changed, she added, not letting him say a word before she hastily stepped out of the room. Tyler, who was listening outside the door, immediately hid himself as soon as it swung open. He stayed hidden until Haley had disappeared into the bedroom. He was about to run down the hall when he heard a chilling voice. Tyler. It was Brad. Tyler froze before he turned like a robot to face the man he had recently handcuffed in his own study. Oh, Brad. Tyler tried to smile. I heard your wife just sneezed again. Do you think we better go ask the butler to get her some medicine? He asked nonchalantly. Brad's intimidating look immediately relaxed as he nodded at his friend. She was drenched from the rain for a while before I arrived. I think she might have got the flu. Tyler continued. I have an idea. Why don't you try cooking for her? She's always cooking for you. Maybe it's time you return the favor? I'm sure she would really appreciate it. You can't make her put in all the effort. You have to show your love too, right? He kept talking without stopping for her breath. You can make her some nice soup and then feed her yourself. Can you imagine? That would be very romantic, right? What do you think? Brad's gaze was focused on Tyler as he rambled along. Brad blinked a few times as he listened to the long-winded advice. Tyler's desperate attempt to distract Brad from what had happened earlier seemed to work out well. But I don't know how, Brad said. Tyler patted his shoulder casually. Leave that to me, my friend. I will teach you how to cook the most nutritious and delicious soup in the world, he said. Brad just looked at him with doubt. Tyler always had a way of exaggerating things. Noticing his disbelief, Tyler sighed and told him the truth. Actually, Mom taught me how to cook it. It was so easy that I learned fast. When Tyler had said the word mom, Brad remembered that his mother had taught Tyler everything, even how to cook simple recipes. Brad had always been busy in front of the computer. He decided that Tyler was probably right about the soup. Okay, let's try it, Brad said. Tyler's eyes widened in excitement. That's the spirit. He clapped his hands together in preparation. Do everything for the sake of your wife, right? Come on, let's go. Brad obediently followed him to the kitchen. Language of Love. Episode 221, Junior Chef. Haley's head was feeling a little foggy from a mild fever, so she headed to the kitchen to look for some medicine. When she got to the doorway, she stopped in surprise. She couldn't believe her eyes. Brad was staring intently at a cup in his hand. The maids and the butler were standing like wallflowers in the corner, and Tyler was acting like a master chef. She could tell that Brad was trying to cook, so she quietly leaned on the doorframe to admire her adorable husband from a distance. How long are you planning to stare at the short-grained rice? Tyler asked with frustration. I told you to wash it, not watch it. Brad looked at his friend and frowned. He was obviously enjoying the rare opportunity to order Brad around. Stop slacking. Your wife is waiting, Tyler continued. When Brad heard this, he jumped into action. He obediently followed every instruction that Tyler gave him without saying a word. He performed every task with intense focus and care. It was especially important to Brad to get this right. Any mistake was unforgivable. Even though Haley wasn't feeling very well, she smiled as she watched him. She wanted to stand there for longer, but she was starting to feel a chill creep into her body. Brad had finally put the rice and water in a pot, and Tyler told him to let it sit for 30 minutes when Haley sneezed, breaking the silence in the room. Everyone looked at her, and Brad immediately walked up. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be resting upstairs? He asked worriedly. Haley just smiled. I wanted to watch Chef Brad cooking, she replied. Brad fell silent. What are you cooking? She asked. He said nothing as he tried to remember. I'm cooking soup for you, he finally replied. Haley smiled widely again. She felt her heart being warm despite the chill in her body. She was about to say thank you when she sneezed again. I'll take you back upstairs, Brad said when he noticed her heavy eyes. As soon as he touched her, he immediately became worried. He moved closer to her and placed his palm on her forehead. A look of extreme worry flashed across his face. You're burning up, he said. Haley ignored his concern. Don't worry. If I eat your soup and take some medicine, I'll be better in no time, she replied. The butler behind them cleared his throat to get their attention. So you can leave the rest to us. We will also prepare some medicine and call you once everything is ready. He motioned Brad and Haley to the door. Brad picked up Haley and carried her like a princess up the stairs and into their room before he placed her gently on the bed. Are you all right? He asked as he sat beside her. I'm fine, just feeling a bit cold, she replied. She was about to say more when Brad suddenly laid down and wrapped his arms around her. He pulled her close to him without saying anything. Haley was stunned and swallowed the words she was about to say. Do you feel any warmer now? He asked. You'll catch a cold if we stay like this, she replied, but Brad just pulled her even closer to him until their bodies were pressed against each other, closer than ever. I already told you. I don't mind. I don't want to just watch you like this, he said. Haley's heart began to race wildly. Episode 222, Special Medicine. The sun had yet to set, but lying in Brad's warm embrace, Haley felt like his touch was a soothing lullaby that was forcing her to fall asleep. This was the first time they had ever cuddled like this. His arms wrapped around her as their bodies shared each other's heat. It gave her an indescribable feeling of warmth and comfort. She felt like his embrace was the only medicine she needed. She couldn't stop her eyes from slowly closing. Brad noticed her loud and fast heartbeat slowly stabilizing. Her hands started to drop, and her warm breath started to slow. He knew she had fallen asleep. He took a deep, relaxing breath, feeling like he had underestimated his effect on her. He had embraced her with the sole intention of trying to warm her up, but the longer he held her close to himself, the more he felt his internal temperature rising. He couldn't tell if it was a fever or desire, but now both of them were hot. He tried to keep a level head, but the warm sensation inside him was melting his ice-cold rationality. After a couple of deep breaths, intense self-criticizing, and thinking about his wife's health, he was ready to overthrow the desires of the flesh. He decided to turn into a lifeless, immovable teddy bear, acting as a thermal blanket for Haley. He was happy staying like this until someone knocked on the door. He was about to slip out of bed when she suddenly hugged him tighter, as if she was trying to stop him from leaving. Brad carefully slipped his hand into his pocket and took out his cell phone. He didn't want to wake her up, so he sent a message to Tyler and asked him to deliver food to them later on. Time went by and Brad finally fell into a deep sleep. His exhaustion seemed to have finally overtaken him. He had spent most of the day worrying about Haley, and it had taken its toll on his energy level. He felt like he had just survived a lengthy battle. Cuddling like this with his wife was more than enough to calm his nerves. Since Haley had come into his life, she had become his sleeping pill. Without her, Brad didn't know if he could survive. An hour later, Brad opened his eyes. The first thing he did was to place his palm on Haley's forehead. To his surprise, her temperature hadn't dropped at all. It was then that he remembered that she hadn't eaten or taken any medicine. He immediately got out of bed and went to the kitchen. The butler was still waiting for him. When he saw Brad, he heated up the soup they had prepared and gave it to him. He gave Brad some instructions, and he listened carefully. After that, he went back to their room and began to wake her up. "Haley." He called out her name, but she just creased her forehead and kept sleeping. He felt bad waking her up, but he knew she needed some nourishment, so he called her name again. When she still didn't open her eyes, he gently shook her until she finally started to wake up. "You have to eat," he said with a worried tone, "and I brought you some medicine." After blinking a few times and rubbing her eyes, Haley nodded and mumbled her approval. Brad helped her sit up and leaned her against the headboard. He filled the spoon and lifted it near her mouth. Haley's eyes widened and she shook her head slightly. "It's fine, I can do it on my own." "Let me," Brad interrupted. Not only was he trying his best to take care of her, but he also remembered the time that she had fed him. He wanted to return the favor. Thinking of this, he gazed at her intently. Then a sudden smile broke out across his face. "Say ah," he said softly. Haley was shocked. His caring nature overwhelmed her. He smiled and spoke so sweetly to her that she felt like she might pass out. She never expected this type of behavior from her husband. Even though she was sick and tired, she was impressed at how cute and adorable he was being. She was so dumbfounded that she couldn't even say a word. She remembered the time she had spoon-fed Brad. The way he looked at her, the way he smiled, and the way he spoke was similar, yet completely different to this situation. "What's this?" she wondered. "Is this what they mean when they say that revenge is sweet?" She remembered how embarrassed Brad had been when she had started to feed him. She started to feel like her own face was burning. She was too preoccupied to notice that her husband was worried he wasn't doing enough to care for her. He started to rethink everything he had done that night. He analyzed his actions to see if he had made any type of mistake. Then he thought back on the time Haley had fed him. He remembered her dazzling smile and her eyes twinkling like bright stars in the night sky. He suddenly felt disheartened. He couldn't compete with her affectionate nature. He was trying his best, but he was still new at this and doubted he was having the same soothing effect on her that she had on him. Brad was worrying himself into a state of crisis. Outfit. Episode 223, Doubts. The crisis within Brad was worsening by the second, and he didn't have a clue about what to do next. He even started to think about going to Tyler for advice. But as he looked at Haley, he realized he couldn't waste any more time. All he could think of doing was to try again. "Haley, say ah," he repeated. Calling her by her name made her face burn even hotter. She got so flustered that she still couldn't respond. When she noticed his expression getting gloomy, she immediately snapped out of it. Before he could start putting the spoon down, she opened her mouth and devoured the soup. I can't taste very well right now, but I like it," she said. His eyes instantly brightened. He immediately filled the spoon again and continued to feed her. He looked incredibly happy with himself. The sparkle in his eyes intensified with every spoonful. For him, it was a one-of-a-kind experience. She reached out her hand and ran her fingers through his hair, playfully tugging at it as she spoke. "Don't treat me like a baby. You're spoiling me too much. I might end up getting exceedingly dependent on you. You don't want that, do you?" she asked as she smiled at him. He just looked back at her with a questioning gaze. "Is there anything wrong?" he asked. She didn't know how to respond to his question. "If what I'm doing is called spoiling, then I don't mind. I want to spoil you even more, he said, but then Haley coughed. She coughed a couple more times. This man isn't going to stop, she thought with delight. He just keeps getting better and better. He worried that she had choked on the soup, so he quickly gave her a glass of water. Are you all right? He asked, and she nodded immediately. I'm fine, she replied. Brad continued feeding her until she was ready to take her medicine. After she was finished, he stood up and returned everything to the kitchen. Then he changed into his pajamas before going back to the room. But by the time he returned, she was already fast asleep. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched her resting peacefully, as he gently brushed aside some strands of hair from her face. It was midnight. Tyler, who was sleeping in Brad's study, opened his eyes wearily. He slowly rose and turned his face. He wasn't surprised to see the silhouette of Brad sitting near the window frame. He was quietly glaring at something small sparkling in his hand while the faint light of the moon cascaded over him. Tyler stood and walked over to him. As he approached, the object in Brad's hand became visible. Tyler recognized it immediately. It was the incredibly unique ring that Brad had spent a fortune on. What's going on? Don't tell me you're planning to propose to her tomorrow, Tyler asked, but Brad didn't reply. Well, it's not like I'm against the idea, but I would advise you not to do it as soon as she wakes up. He chuckled. I can't imagine her reaction if you suddenly proposed to her when she was still half asleep, without even the chance to comb her hair or wash her face. That wouldn't be romantic at all. She might even reject you if... Shut up, Brad said, cutting through his incessant talking. Tyler could only sigh. Then tell me, are you really planning to propose? He asked, and Brad looked at him intently as he opened his mouth. Episode 224, Planning for the Future. So, are you really planning to propose now? Tyler asked again, but instead of answering him, Brad started with his own questions. Tell me, what happened in the police station? He demanded coldly. Tyler scratched the back of his neck and answered him right away. Don't worry, they didn't touch her. They just showed her a picture of you and you're a boy, he replied, and Brad fell silent for a moment before continuing. So if I had shown her my face before this... Brad paused as he gathered his thoughts, and Tyler continued. If you had, the agents would have surely found out that she's connected to you, even if she had tried to deny it. After all, the agents that were interrogating her were members of the FBI's top intelligence unit. They have psychologists who are expert in detecting lies and reading body language and expressions, Tyler said. Brad averted his gaze and looked up into the night sky as he clenched his fists. Besides, your wife is just like you, he continued. Neither of you have the talent of being able to hide the truth. Brad still remained silent. Brad had always been aware of the risks and had always been afraid that eventually something like this would happen. He knew from the beginning what the price of revealing himself to Haley would be. He knew that if that happened, his dear wife would end up just like him, a person hidden away from the eyes of the world. She would be forced to hide in the shadows. She would lose all her freedom. If she were a bird, her wings would be broken, and her only way of surviving would be to stay locked inside a cage. The fear that was lurking inside Brad every day was unbearable. He was terrified to death that one day, one wrong move, and he would lose her. A part of him wanted to show himself to her so he could be completely honest with her. However, he knew that if he did that, it would be the same as confining her forever into his world of darkness. Brad couldn't bear to do that to his beloved wife. He didn't want to force her to live like that. He would rather destroy himself than let that happen to Haley. Brad looked at the ring in his hand again before he buried it in his fist. The darkness that filled his eyes made Tyler feel an extreme chill run down his spine. With just a single glance from Brad, Tyler knew exactly what his friend was thinking. Tyler knew that Brad would never risk anything when it came to Haley. He knew that Brad would never forgive anyone, let alone himself, if anything ever happened to her. Let's talk more about this later, Tyler said. I have something I would like to say regarding her. Sort out your thoughts so you can share your ultimate plan with me soon. For now, let's go back to sleep. It's late. A moment of cold, deafening silence followed, which Tyler broke with a loud yawn. When Brad didn't move, Tyler just walked back to his bed and lay down. Eventually, Tyler heard him finally leaving the room. Approximately 2 hours later, Tyler's eyes opened when someone entered the room again. When he looked up, Brad was already standing beside his bed. Tyler looked over at the clock with blurry eyes and groaned. What is it this time? He asked sluggishly, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. Go back to your room. I'm going to sleep here, Brad replied. Tyler sat up in surprise. Are you sleep-talking? He exclaimed. Brad just heaved a deep sigh. What the hell's going on with you? Tyler asked. You should be the one going back to your room. Don't leave your wife alone. His voice was a mix of frustration and confusion. When Brad quietly turned his back and left the room without saying a word, Tyler could only stare at the door with disbelief. Is he even awake? Tyler murmured to himself. People in love are beyond my understanding. He lay back down again when all of a sudden a thought occurred to him and he sat back up. Wait, could it be that he's trying to avoid his wife because he's having a hard time controlling himself? He blurted out into the empty room. He jumped out of the bed, walked over to the door, and locked it. The study was the closest room to the bedroom, and Tyler knew Brad would never want to go too far from his wife, so now he wouldn't be able to sneak back even if he wanted to. Episode 225, Sleeping Arrangements. The sun was already rising when Tyler stepped out of the study. He was walking down the stairs when he remembered the events of the night before. Of course, he was hungry for gossip about what had happened after he had locked the study door. He immediately turned and was about to go back upstairs when he halted. He noticed something from the corner of his eye. He turned back and looked at the couch in the middle of the living room. Tyler wasted no time walking over to see Brad just waking up. He didn't know what to say. The man on the couch slowly rose. He glanced quickly at Tyler before changing his mask. Tyler still couldn't believe that Brad had actually slept on the couch. He was about to say something when Brad suddenly sneezed not once, but twice. A thought immediately popped into Tyler's head, and a mischievous smile appeared on his face. Wait. You don't easily catch a cold, do you? Unless, of course, he smiled wider as he tried to get to the truth. You did something last night, didn't you? I'm right, aren't I? He asked as he chuckled. The color of Brad's face turned crimson. Tyler knew he was right. How far did you go, my friend? You didn't actually take advantage of her while she was asleep. Before Tyler could finish asking his naughty questions, Brad covered his mouth with his hand. Tyler was about to struggle when he heard another voice. Brad, you slept here? Haley asked, and Tyler knew he had to behave. After giving him a threatening stare, Brad removed his hand from Tyler's mouth. The two men turned and looked at Haley. She started to walk over to them, but as she got closer, Brad sneezed again. You caught my cold. Is that why you left the bed and slept here? She asked worriedly. For some reason, Brad stiffened and averted his gaze before he nodded at her hesitantly. Haley stepped closer to him and placed the back of her hand on his forehead. Thankfully, his temperature wasn't that severe yet, so she heaved a sigh of relief. Come, you have to take some medicine before your cold gets worse, she said as she grabbed his hand and led him to the kitchen. Tyler, who was left standing by the couch, started murmuring, Oh, come on. Obviously it's a lie. Can't believe anything from someone in love. He sighed. Oh well, this is getting intense. I wonder what happened last night. In the kitchen, Haley was cooking while Brad sat there watching her. Next time, when your cold is gone, let's cook together, she said, smiling brightly. Brad just quietly nodded. Wait a bit longer, okay? It's almost done. She continued stirring the pot of soup. Take your time, he said. Brad stared at Haley while she continued cooking. She looked as though she was enjoying everything that she was doing. He admired his wife as if she were a living, breathing work of art. But the longer he watched her, the more he thought about what had happened last night, making his face and ears go unbelievably hot and red. Passionately. Within seconds, she had started to kiss him back. He had known she was dreaming, but he had not been able to end the kiss. He had gently cradled her head as the kiss had gone on longer, and his desire had overtaken all rational thought. He had kissed her across her cheek and down to her neck when she had suddenly spoken. Brad, let me see your face, she had said. It felt like she had taken a fire extinguisher to him. His body had gone cold and had weakened instantly. Episode 227, Look Away. Brad, who had been in the middle of thinking about what had happened last night, was suddenly snapped back to the present when Haley gently touched his cheek. Are you all right? You seem a bit flushed, she said as she looked at him with curious eyes. I'm fine, he replied somewhat defensively. Haley tilted her head and stared at him. She had gotten a different feeling from him this morning. He seemed to be averting his eyes and acting shy around her. She did find his shy expression cute, but for a man who spent most of their time together staring at her intently, it was a bit strange that he now wouldn't make eye contact with her. Haley wondered if something was bothering him, but she shook it off. I don't want to jump to conclusions and misunderstand him again, she thought. So for now, she decided to ignore the behavior and just smile at him. Okay, time to eat, she announced. She stabbed a piece of apple with her fork and lifted it to his mouth. Say-ah. He was dumbstruck. She wanted to return the favor of taking care of him and make him feel the way she had, pampering him the way he had pampered her. She tried to think of something adorable she could do and make him feel as lovingly attacked as she had felt, but she realized that she didn't have a chance at competing with him because he actually had no clue that he was being adorable. He had simply been himself. So instead of trying to do something cute, she had decided she would just feed him. She moved the fork closer to his mouth, but he still wouldn't look at her. He was feeling guilty about the kisses he had stolen from her the previous night. He couldn't believe that he had almost lost control when she was asleep, and he felt like he had somehow violated her. On top of that, he had now lied to her for the first time, and he felt as if he had committed a serious crime. He now knew that lying to his wife was not a good idea. No matter a big or small lie, he had betrayed her trust. To a man that was as honest as he was, it felt like a huge failure. He was lost in thought, trying to figure out what he should do when Haley spoke. "Brad, look at me," she said with a gentle, yet somewhat authoritative voice. He immediately lifted his gaze to her. As soon as she had his attention, she gave him a sexy wink. "Brad, my love." "Say ah," she prompted. He felt like his mind left his body and everything shut down. He sat like this so long, Haley retracted her hand that was holding the fork. She thought her move had been an utter failure. She turned her gaze away and nibbled on the apple, completely disappointed. Meanwhile, Tyler, who had just entered the dining room to tell Brad that there was a call he needed to take, halted when he realized something was a little bit off. He stared at the couple sitting across from each other, and his brows knitted together. He took in the frozen, stiff posture of Brad and the slumped, defeated look of Haley. He had become accustomed to seeing these two gazing lovingly at each other and smiling, so he found this gloomy atmosphere a bit of a shock. What's this? No loving gazes or rays of sunshine shooting out of them? Are they finally having their first fight? Seriously? He wondered. Episode 228, Birthday Surprise. The cell phone in Tyler's hand wouldn't stop vibrating, so he decided he had to break the silence in the room. He cleared his throat, making Haley turn toward him. "Sorry for the intrusion. Your husband needs to answer this call, so..." Tyler said as he forced a smile. "No, it's fine," she said, and she started to stand and leave when Tyler stopped her. No, you don't need to leave. This is not confidential or anything," he said. Haley sat back down. Tyler passed the phone to Brad. "They wanted to talk to you. They've been calling nonstop," he explained. Brad looked uninterested, but he answered the call and listened quietly. "Hello, Brad?" The voice of their adoptive mother rang out across the line. Brad replied with a simple, "You see, your little brother's fiancée will celebrate her birthday tomorrow evening, and your grandfather keeps nagging me to make him come home and attend her party. You know he won't come if you stay there, so can you both come home today?" she pleaded. Brad looked at Tyler, who was looking at the food on the table with sparkling eyes before he replied. I'll tell him," he said, then he ended the call. "What did they say?" Tyler asked as soon as Brad gave the cell phone back to him. "They want you to go home," Brad said. Tyler just raised his eyebrow. "They said you need to attend your fiancé's birthday," he continued. Tyler almost choked. Haley excitedly joined the conversation upon learning Tyler had a fiancé. "Mr. Clark, you have a fiancé?" she exclaimed, and the two men turned toward her. He has. Her birthday is tomorrow," Brad answered her. Haley gasped. "Wow, I thought you were single. Congratulations, Mr. Clark," she said with a wide smile. Tyler shifted awkwardly and scratched the back of his neck. He forced a soft laugh. "Wait, tomorrow? What a coincidence. My best friend's birthday is also tomorrow," Haley said. Sweat formed on Tyler's brow as he thought, "That's no coincidence, Miss Haley. Your best friend and my fiancé are one and the same." He couldn't find actual words to say it, though. "You go. Ken is here, so you don't have to worry," Brad said. Tyler's eyes widened a bit before he suddenly turned toward Haley, asking as though he hadn't heard him. "Miss Haley, you're not going to attend your best friend's birthday party?" he asked. Haley pursed her lips. "She's always invited me every year, but this time she's celebrating it somewhere far, so..." She trailed off. Brad, enjoying her cute pout, spoke up. "Far away? Where?" "Abroad," she replied. Brad wanted to help her attend the party, no matter how far away it was, so he started working out the logistics of getting her there in his head. Tyler just stood staring at the pair of them. "Brad, why don't we go buy a gift for Mr. Clark's fiancé?" she asked, perking back up. Brad agreed without hesitation. "Let's buy a gift for your best friend, too," he said, enjoying how Haley smiled brightly at his suggestion. Her smile was infectious, and he felt himself smiling too, as if he were a mirror of her every emotion. Tyler was confused. Weren't you two fighting just now?" he asked. The couple looked at him with the same clueless expression. "Huh? Who's fighting?" they both asked. Tyler smacked his forehead with his hand. "These two. What will they be like on the day of their first fight?" Tyler had joined them to eat, and after their meal, Haley went to the kitchen while Brad and Tyler were left at the table. Tyler put his hand on his stomach. "Ugh, I'm so full," he happily complained. "So are you planning on helping Haley attend her friend's birthday party tomorrow?" he asked. I want her to be happy," Brad replied. "So, what are you planning to do? Are you still telling me to go home alone?" Tyler asked. "You don't need to worry. Ken is here, and I'll stay here until you're back, so just go," Brad replied. Tyler stood up. "Then you're going to let her attend her friend's birthday alone?" Tyler asked. Brad's brows knit together. Looking at the change in his expression, Tyler moved toward him and put his arm on Brad's shoulder as he spoke softly. "Actually, my fiancée and her best friend are the same person," Tyler said as he watched Brad's eyes widen in surprise. "So, you can stay here then. Don't worry. I'll take care of your wife." Tyler assured him and then walked away. Brad's voice rang out loudly behind him. The three of us will go. Tyler grinned victoriously. Episode 229, Grandpa Returns. Tyler, who was leaning against the car lazily, waiting for the happy couple to finish getting ready and join him, felt his phone vibrate and took it out to see a message from King Anderson saying he was about to arrive at Gray Mansion. Well, that's bad timing. I wonder what he's coming here for, Tyler murmured to himself. Within a few minutes, a black car pulled up the drive. The elderly man with a majestic aura stepped out of the car, and Tyler immediately went and greeted him. He was wearing his butler's disguise. Hello, young man. Are you about to leave? King Anderson asked. Tyler nodded. Yes, sire. King Anderson put his hand on Tyler's shoulder and asked him to follow him. The two men walked toward the bench tucked in behind thick green bushes and sat down. I'm not going to beat around the bush anymore, Tyler. Are you two aware of something mysterious about Brad's wife's background? The king asked. Tyler's eyes grew wide, but he didn't say anything. I received information that she lost her memory when she was 9, so I asked Peterson to investigate what happened to her, but he found nothing, as if the girl didn't exist until she turned 9. Now tell me, is this Brad's doing? Did Brad block all information about her? The king asked. Tyler scratched the back of his neck before he replied. Sire, are you getting suspicious of her? Tyler asked, and the older man fell silent for a while. This is not about suspicion. I was just curious about anything concerning the mother of his future children, the king answered as he sighed. All of a sudden, his voice was energized again. So, how's my granddaughter-in-law? Is she pregnant yet? The lively elderly man asked. Sweat began to drip down Tyler's forehead. I don't think that will happen anytime soon, he said. The king's excited mood deflated, replaced with a cold glare he directed at Tyler. Explain what you mean by those words, he ordered. Tyler sighed. He knew the king well enough to know he wouldn't back down until he got an answer, so Tyler didn't have any choice but to tell him. Well, you know just how deep his love is for her. He will never put her in danger, and he will never do anything to hurt her. He's decided not to touch her until he can reveal himself to her. And that man, we both know he will never go back on his word. Things have been changing. I think he's starting to lose control. But I don't think his will waver anytime soon. What happened yesterday also scared him quite a lot, so I don't think there's any way to make him compromise. I think he's even planning to leave her soon to settle everything, Tyler said honestly. He watched as the elderly man's face turned unbelievably gloomy. Until he can reveal himself to her? So he's trying to clear his name before giving me a grandchild? Ridiculous. How long will that take? A year? Or more? Is he going to wait for my death first? King Anderson's voice had risen and his temper flared. Tyler had to quickly find a way to calm him back down. Please calm down, sir. I know this frustrates you, but we both know how willful and stubborn Brad is, and he really loves her very much, to the extent that she's more important to him than his own life. He's ready to go through anything for her, so I don't think there's anything that will change his mind, Tyler said. The king took several deep breaths. I understand his intentions and just what kind of human being he is, but I don't think this is good, especially since he's thinking of leaving her. If I don't do something now, I might leave this world without even seeing my great-grandchild, the king replied with intense determination in his eyes. Tyler felt the sweat building on his forehead again. What are you going to do? He hesitantly asked. King Anderson clenched his hands into fists, and his voice filled with determination. Leave this to me, young man. This old man will do everything, even if I have to use underhanded tricks. His eyes looked serious, but Tyler caught the mischief in them and started picturing the troublesome and relentless storm of tricks coming for Brad. Looks like my chances of becoming an uncle have increased exponentially. This is starting to get interesting. Very interesting. Okay, old man, I'm rooting for your success. Episode 230, Tyler and His Big Mouth. By the time Tyler got back, the king, disguised as Mr. Wilson, returned. The couple was already waiting for them outside the house. Upon seeing Mr. Wilson, Haley's eyes widened. Ah, Grandpa, she yelled, and she immediately ran toward him, leaving both Tyler and Brad speechless and astonished, looking at each other in question and mouthing the word, Grandpa? Oh, it's been a long time, Miss Haley. How have you been? The older man asked with a pleasant smile. In an instant, he had just become a completely different person from his usual domineering self. Looking at his expression and his amazingly kind way of talking to her, Brad and Tyler just looked at each other again. But of course, the one who was surprised the most was Brad. He hadn't expected his grandfather to be this close with his wife, so close that she was calling him Grandpa. Grandpa, are you going to be the substitute butler again? Haley asked, and the older man nodded politely. Yes, from today I will stay here and help you water the plants again, he replied, and the two continued talking as if they had the most genuine grandfather and granddaughter relationship. While Tyler and Brad's gazes were focused on them, Tyler's cell phone vibrated, and as soon as he saw the message, his brows knitted. He walked away and made a brief call before returning to Brad. It's no good, Brad. She can't go with us. The only way for her not to appear suspicious is for her to travel alone and take a passenger plane, Tyler said softly. As expected, Brad's expression darkened. Tyler started weighing things out in his mind, and he realized that taking Haley to Lascamar with them was a bad idea. So Tyler immediately made a decision. Brad, I'll go alone. You both will stay here. Brad gave him a dark look. Don't worry. I think telling her that I can deliver her present will be enough to make her happy. Besides, I believe she'll be happier if she spends the day with you here, Tyler argued. Brad's face instantly brightened, causing Tyler to look at him in disbelief. I can't believe I just discovered the easiest way to coax this man. So sweet talking to him about his wife is that powerful, huh? We will stay here then, Brad agreed, and after some moments, the three of them headed out to a gift shop. Brad, do you have any idea what we should buy for Mr. Clark's fiancé? Haley asked. She got no reply. Brad just stared at her with a look that was telling her he had no idea at all. Okay, let me put it this way. If you were going to buy a present for a woman, what would you buy? She asked with genuine curiosity. A woman? Not you? He asked, staring at her. Haley nodded. I wouldn't give any present to any other woman, so I don't know what to buy. But if it's you, that's a different story, he said. Haley instantly went red. Brad was just answering her honestly, acting as though all the words that were coming out of his mouth were normal and that there was nothing out of the ordinary with them. He looked completely unaware of just how impactful and cheesy his words were, not knowing that his words were causing Haley's heart to beat erratically, rendering her speechless. When they arrived at the store, Haley was the only one to go inside. Brad and Tyler had a serious discussion waiting for her in the car. Even if Ken is here, you are not allowed to step outside the mansion until I return. Do you understand? Tyler said firmly, and Brad nodded. You too, old man. Listen to my words. If you let Brad leave the house, I'll kill you, he continued as he looked at the man in the driver's seat with a gaze filled with deadly warnings. I'm just 4 years older than you. Don't call me old man, Ken replied. Tyler smirked. Oh, since when did old man Ken have the guts to talk back to me like this? He said with an evil smile. Ken replied immediately. It's because you can't send me away no matter what I say. You need me right now. Tyler had no response to that. Rest assured, I will protect him with my life. You finally have your own love life, so go and enjoy your time with your fiancé, he continued. Tyler almost choked because of his last sentence. I agree. You might find it difficult in the beginning, but you'll be fine. If you need help, just call me, Brad said. Tyler snapped. Hey, what are you trying to say? His face filled with shock. Brad just looked at him blankly. They said she dislikes you. This is your first time being in a relationship, so don't hesitate to ask for help, Brad replied, acting as a concerned big brother. I agree, boss. Brad is already an experienced husband, so don't be shy about asking advice from your older brother, Ken goaded him. Tyler felt his veins bulging, and he laughed stiffly. Stop it, you two. I don't need advice coming from the likes of you both. We all know how inexperienced you both really are, he retorted suggestively. Ken's mouth fell open, and Brad blinked calmly. Who said I'm inexperienced? Ken blurted out. Tyler just smirked. Wouldn't you like to know? Tyler, that kind of inexperience has nothing to do with it, Brad said with an ever so serious expression. But Tyler didn't buy his words. Go and make a baby first, Brad. I'll only listen to you after you've been deflowered. Tyler suddenly clamped his mouth shut and cursed himself when he realized the car door had already been opened and Haley was standing staring at them.